All right, there we go. Hello, hello. If you can hear us, if you can see us, please do let me know, especially because it's the morning, and I think, is this the first Sunday thing we've done since the trip? I think it is. Yeah. So, I think I don't, because we didn't do last week, and then the week before. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I've not been paying as much attention as I should, but it's an absolute delight to be back with you over on the other side of the, over there.
Yeah, well, no, Warhammer World was a Wednesday stream.
That was a Wednesday stream, yeah.
Yeah, not a Sunday stream. I think this is the first Sunday stream.
Our first serious Lorebeards.
So I have to.
It's all lordy.
Yeah, I must say it is much better on the UK side of the what time is it technically where you're at spectrum than the Texan side. It's like 10 a.m.
Why am I doing it at this hour? Yes, so good morning to all of you over on the Texan side, and of course, good afternoon for those of you over on the European side. It is an absolute delight to be back doing our Lorebeards on the Sunday, as we should be, and today's subject is a bit of a gruesome, bloody one that I'm very much looking forward to.
Today's gonna be a really good time. It's been a hot minute since we've tackled the vampire bloodline. The only one we've technically done besides today's is Lorebeards.
Yeah.
So working our way through. I do also want to note, while we'll talk about at the end of the stream who won the poll for the most recent, something that someone pointed out to me that was very, very fair, was that it was pointed out to me by a community member on my Discord that although we have done quite a few votes, they they understandably criticized the system we were using because they pointed out that a character has not won a single poll in about half a year.
Is that true?
Yeah, like they posted like a whole grid of like all the different victories, and it was like, oh, yeah, that's fair. Okay, so we might do some different kinds of
a 3-character one or something like that. That might be different. Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, we'll be kind of messing around with that because I'll see if I can actually copy the image link, and then I'll just post it where anybody can click on it if they want. But I don't know if that'll actually take you to the right thing or if it's gonna like be weird. Also, I like it was too big for YouTube, so it split it up into 2 comments. Great job, me. So it was the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so we had one character win out of the last 15 polls.
That is interesting, but we have a nice mix of all the others, though. Look at that, and
the others have been good,
really close. Joseph Bugman, we actually did, so that's kind of 2 because it was almost a 50-50 split between the 2 of them.
That's true, but I think that's a fair enough excuse for me to be motivated to do a 3-person poll. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, me too. I'm super fascinated to see that they're often, sometimes second, sometimes third, but they're very rarely first. If somebody had asked me that, I wouldn't have called this without looking at the numbers.
Yeah, normally if you're ever, which I don't know why y'all would be, but if you ever were a fly in the room when me and Andy are discussing topics, it's usually us saying, oh, well, here's one good one. And it's like, oh, what 2 other can we throw in that are probably going to lose horribly, but might stand a chance? And then we're wrong about 95% of the time. We're completely wrong. So there's that. But should be a really good time. It's super good to be back with this. There is going to be a lot of big things coming up very soon, as just kind of a heads up for folks that Warhammer is about to get pretty spicy in some good ways. Of that, I haven't had a chance to talk with Andy about it, but just letting you all know that the old world is officially coming to the end of the kind of the repeat stuff, where they have really rushed out the Wood Elf and Beastman books, because the Wood Elf book came out yesterday, and the Beastman book I think comes out in 2 weeks. And then Cathay, there have already been Cathay boxes spotted in the wild. So Cathay's about to go up, and then 99% sure they're dropping Kislev, and then I think we're done with the first edition. So things are about to get pretty wild on the tabletop side, and there's a lot that I'm gonna want to talk about as we're getting up to that point. And of course, we also have Tides of Torment looming on the horizon. They just revealed Sail the Faithless quite recently with some Norse goodies, which is super duper fun. And it's not going to be too much longer before they reveal this month. They're going to reveal the last faction, which is probably high elves. I will be genuinely shocked if it's not.
Yeah, me too.
That's a great question. I don't know if he can say that. If it's like most VA things, he's probably under an NDA.
Yeah, it's just, and it's nothing particularly large either, but it was nothing I expected to be doing. So super fun.
Yeah, well, there you go. From there, Survivor, thank you for the year of support, by the way. Thank you very much. Sub to Sotek Day. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. That's a holiday I'm all in for. And also, Iron Tarkus, thank you for becoming a member. Really appreciate that. All right, so I think we can go ahead and kind of get into starter chats, and then we'll just kind of hop in and see where the day takes us.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Also, oh god, it's finally June. Finally, I felt like May was gonna last for eternity. Okay,
sure.
Good. I got stuff coming up, and I want it to hurry up and get here so I can get it done. Scathane, what makes Blood Dragon's armor red? Just drip choice? Do other vampire lines get trendy red armor? Okay, so kinda, but this kind of falls under that, like, when you're painting minis, there are themes, right? Realistically, in the setting, most blood dragons would probably not be wearing super crazy over the top red armor.
Interestingly, if you go over to the novel expression of how Abhorash popped up, he wasn't wearing red at all. His armor was deep, almost black. So it's not a universal thing.
Yeah, it's just the way the minis show up, especially the Blood Knights, which we'll talk about, are kind of a very specific subsection. And the Blood Knights, to be fair, do tend to very elaborately display themselves with crazy red armor, so they're easily spotted on the battlefield because they're very, they're dramatic. They're vampires. What are you gonna do? So I would say in their case, it's very much kind of a drip choice, and also it's kind of like any knightly order, right? Like when you have a knightly order, they have colors that they wear so you can identify them on the battlefield and be like, oh my god, it's the Knights of whatever. The Knights Panther, very show off. A lot of Bretonnian Knights, very show off. All
Bretonnian Knights.
Silver Helms and Dragon Princes, very show off. The Vampire Knights are the exact same. It's just that the Vampire Knights, the most popular group of them happens to be Blood Dragons, and they wear all red.
I mean, let's keep it very simple. They're called Blood Dragons, and when they make up the paint scheme, they go, I wonder what color I'll choose. And they go, Blood Dragons, let's go green. And they go red. So it's no great surprise. And you'll often find that the art, not just for Blood Dragons, but often vampires as a whole, often uses red as a core theme. So you might find your occasional, say, Karstein wearing bright red lacquered armor and layers, or perhaps enchanted with some blood magic that we really don't want to know anything about. So broadly speaking, it's just a color choice.
Well, thank you for the year of being a member. I didn't know my membership's been up for a year. Maybe each poll should share a theme, so polls could cover topics like character, places, concept, fishman, beard care, and captain organization. There's a lot of those categories we are not going to be able to help you with, more than likely. But that's not a terrible idea for every once in a while. We kind of have fun with it and just sort of bounce around. But
I should really set up my YouTube membership thing, because I've got it already. I just haven't clicked the button to set it off.
Andy doesn't know this, and y'all are about to know this, but me and Andy have to have a talk about monetization things after this stream.
Yeah, we do.
Because we had a discussion about it in the UK, and now I have enough energy that I can bother him about it again. But also, I saw a cheeky comment about the Switch 2. No, I didn't get one because they sold out so fast, and I there's nothing on it that's I'm happy to wait. It's fine. I'll wait. Sean Schultz, which blood house is Andy's favorite? I don't know what a blood house is.
Not entirely sure what you mean by blood house. If you mean by vampire line, or alternatively line of Abhorash, perhaps? Is that what you're going for, Sean? If you're still in the chat, drop that down. Because I'm not quite sure what that would be either.
Yeah, well, we'll keep an eye out for your follow-up comment.
I'm watching for you, Sean. Please add a little bit more detail.
There he is. Thank you very much. I'll add Abhorash and Ushoran to hubbies I can fix, along with Tyrion, Anarion, John Baldrish, Robotnik, Dante, DC Orion, Greasus, UK Comics Grimlock. Wow, okay. Durthu, Shockwave, late 90s Shawn Michaels, Nosferatu Zod, Gothmog, and Yuichiro Onohana. That is a list of...
Hey, Darius, I'm not sure that Abhorash is that broken in comparison to the greater scheme of Warhammer.
Yeah, I mean, compared to everyone else you put on that list, Abhorash is like, he's kind of a dick, but like as far as vampires go, he's pretty chill.
He's not too bad, yeah. So I definitely think that that's an interesting choice of hubby to fix.
Yeah, and still looking out for your follow-up comment, Sean. Let's see. Mads Christensen. Hey guys, love blood dragons. Off topic. Did other races / factions than the dwarfs and Sigmar's empire fight in battle against Morkar the Uniter? Probably, because he had to get down there from somewhere, but we don't know. I will note, I did for research on a video I'm working on. I have been rereading through as many of the elf books as I can get my hands on. So last night I read the 4th, 5th, and 6th edition books of all the elf books. I did not realize how lame Morkar was. Like, he's so sad in that, but like we've talked about how Morkar originally fought Anarian. That is a very generous term for what happened. Anarian just sort of one-shot him. like Morkar would have been the guy in the movie that Wilhelm screams. Anarian kills him so over the, like, it's so sad. Like, I thought they like fought. No, Anarian just like walks out of the flame, picks up some spear and throws it at him, and it impales him and kills like 2 guys behind him. It's like, oh, Morkar's kind of lame in the original story. Jeez. He was a terrible ever chosen.
Anarian was astonishing.
True.
Look at it. Yeah.
It just made me laugh. I was really not expecting for him to just get red shirt like immediately when Anarian walks out. Thank you very much for the 5 gift subs, listener Chris. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you very much. Necromancer Cobalt, time to learn about that one secret trick to beat the bloodthirst that most vampire counts don't want you to know about. Yes, we will actually talk about that quite a bit. Yeah,
we'll talk about that one. That's a core component of what being a blood dragon is.
Yep. Necromancer Cobalt, happy Pride Day for my fellows. Yes, indeed. Happy Pride Day for everyone out there, wherever you are on that massive, wonderful spectrum.
Our household is so deep in that spectrum that it's just we're a giant rainbow over there. Good times.
Make sure to celebrate, especially these days. It's important to celebrate when you can.
Absolutely.
Donna Man, so this is probably going to be a topic of discussion, but am I correct that the blood dragons are a bloodline and then blood knights are just a name for vampiric knights of any Okay, so there is a genuinely funny story behind this that we will start the stream with, because I imagine it'll kind of come up in Andy's intro, because there is a goof and we'll talk about the goof.
Yeah, well, is the answer for that one.
Hendrik, sad we didn't get a Walach stream. This will do, though. I mean, he's gonna come up, so...
boy gods, is he gonna come up?
He's pretty important to this particular storyline. Obviously, we won't talk about all of his nitty-gritty details, because he does have, like, a sad love story we're not gonna have time for.
It's a love story. Yes, he does.
Vampires are really... They got that Apollo-level tragic love shit going on all the time. All right, and with that, I think we're actually good to go ahead and get into the intro a little earlier than usual.
All righty, I'm good with that. Are we all ready? Are we sitting comfortably? Because I'm going to start this time with at least a beginning. Although, as you'll find out, it's not the beginning. And the beginning, if you will, that I'm going to start with is the 5th edition of Warhammer. And I'm going to take you all the way back to 1999. When the Vampire Counts Army List came out for the 5th edition of Warhammer. Now, if you don't know your editions very well, Warhammer 4th edition was the first big box set that rebuilt the entire Warhammer game from the ground up. And the 5th edition was a consolidation of everything that 4th had done. Many people who look back at this era think of it as Hero Hammer, because it was one of the editions where characters absolutely dominated the game. And units were pretty much attendants that wandered along with your magic item laden characters.
It's amazing reading special character profiles from back then and seeing that their rules would take up like 2 pages.
Oh yeah,
like my god. Like
Hero
Jesus.
Hammer time was certainly a time, and one of the reasons Hero Hammer got its big fame was because of the Vampire Counts army list, because the Vampire Counts kicked living ass. Now, the Vampire Counts did something that hadn't been done in previous editions. They took the undead umbrella and they said, yeah, screw it. We're going to take one small part of the undead and just detail that as an entire army. Beforehand, the undead was everything that was undead, whether it was necromancers, vampires, liches, or whatever else it might be. We're all just one big undead army. But with the 5th edition, we began to break that up a bit. And the Vampire Counts were the first real strong drive into that. And in the Vampire Counts army list, they introduced a new concept to Warhammer that had been kind of alluded at in various points in the past, but never really nailed down. And that was the concept of consistent bloodlines. So this was bloodlines of vampires that all shared certain traits. Now, novels right back to the beginning of Warhammer had alluded to this. For example, Genevieve Dieudonné, from the Red Thirst novels through to Drachenfels, through to Beasts in Velvet. She was from a line of vampires that shared certain traits. And they took that idea and, let's be honest, kind of looked at Vampire the Masquerade, or alternatively, kind of had a wee nod over towards Anne Rice, but it was
Games
much
Workshop?
White Wolf, and
lifting ideas? What?
and we got our first new sets of bloodlines, and one of those bloodlines was the Blood Dragons. But it is worth noting that in the 5th edition version of the Blood Dragons, the name Blood Dragon is not strictly speaking the name of the bloodline. And I'll get to that in just a second. So in this, we get ourselves introduced to the Blood Dragons, who are effectively vampire knights, filled with all the honor and courage of a knight, but also filled with all the bloodlust and horror of a vampire. And we're given a very loose story there that I'm not going to go into, because we're almost certainly going to go into the origins of at least the Blood Dragon Knight side of it all, the Ordo Draconis idea, a little bit later in the stream. But let's just sum it up with a big vampire arrived. His name was Walach in Blood Keep. A keep that was, and I will quote from the book, south of Nuln, yet on almost every map is placed north of Nuln. Let's just not think about that too much. On a primary route into Bretonnia, and let's not think too much about the pass that goes directly into Athel Loren, not Bretonnia. But all of that aside, there's some lovely map, interesting choices made during this era. All of that aside, he arrives up at this looming castle up in the Grey Mountains, and he basically walks through all of the knights there, and any that give him a sufficient challenge and are sufficiently honorable and also martially capable enough, Walach, the vampire in question, allows to survive and then turns into a vampire and creates an entire new order of vampire knights who are all dedicated to martial prowess and being awesome. A great twin-headed serpent is their new moniker. They're new blood-drinking knight vampires from the Grey Mountains. And this is the source of the bloodline. But interestingly, throughout the book, the vampires are actually the Harkon line, because he's Walach of House Harkon. That was the noble line that he came from, presumably in the Empire. And they are in more than one place marked as the Harkon vampires, in the same way we get the Karstein vampires. So basically, it's just a different bloodline. You've got the Harkons over here, and you've got the Karsteins over here. And this pretty much is the setup. All of the rules for the vampires that are of this bloodline are all about giving you extra attacks or being better in close combat or taking on challenges. And at the back of the book, we get stats for Walach himself, which I wish I had in front of me because they're pretty fucking amazing. He is extraordinarily powerful.
Like 8s and 9s.
Weapon skill 9. He's got 5 attacks as a base. He's got a whole bunch of special rules. He's got a ridiculous chalice. In fact, so important was he to the general idea of what vampires were. If you go to the 5th edition army list, the picture on the front of the army list is him. It's Walach with his great chalice, his massive sword, because he has a mighty chalice of blood, because, of course, he's a freaking vampire. And he becomes the Grand Master of an order. There's an entire story about what happens to that order. We'll go into that later. But you've got the core of what the Blood Dragons started as. However, this is all about to change, and only 2 years later. 2 years later, the original vampires, which I think were put in place by Thomas Prennan and Alessio Calvatore, are rewritten. Just 2 years afterwards. And 2 years after, Alessio comes in again and goes, actually, when we look at it, we've decided that having a tiny little bloodline from one single castle isn't quite enough for our big blood dragon idea. What the blood dragons actually are is any vampire that has come from Abhorash. Now, who is Abhorash? Well, we'll get into that a little bit later on in the stream. But again, for our introduction purpose, he's one of the very first vampires that came out of, well, right down the south in the Hekara, over in the city of Lamia. And he was a great vampire general. And he had problems with the whole vampire thing. And we're going to discuss that later. But for the important part, he did something that no other vampire did. He was absolutely convinced there must be a way to get out of vampirism. So he decided, and I'm going to just say in his infinite wisdom, that the correct way to get out of vampirism was to keep on drinking lots of different types of blood until, you know, one of them worked.
Scientific method, I mean.
He did, until eventually he finds himself on top of a mountain with lightning crackling in the background, and presumably it's an overcast day because he's a vampire. They don't like the sun too much. And he has himself an almighty battle against a dragon, a red dragon at that. Thankfully, because it wasn't the Blood Dragon Knights that named them Blood Dragons. No. It was Abhorash kicking living crap out of an enormous dragon that was so big it could wrap around the mountain itself, drinking its blood and lifting himself out of vampirism that made him a blood dragon. And then he tells all of his kids, well, his blood-kissed vampire children of the night.
Darkness,
His children of darkness. He tells all of them, if you can reach the awesomeness of me, keep on kicking in bigger things, show that you are martially extraordinary and drink a dragon, you will also be lifted free from your vampiric curse. Go forth, my blood dragon children. You see, dragon, blood, that's why you're called blood dragons, not because of that knightly order. Go forth, my blood dragon children, and do the thing. And indeed, that was the new source of the blood dragons as we head into 6th edition. Now, the character of the blood dragons is given a little bit more detail. Now they're very clearly marked as definitely not being interested in supremacy like most vampires are. They're not interested in dominating everything around them. They're interested in individuals. They're interested in one-on-one combat, and those who are, oddly speaking, honorable, but for those who are not honorable by what they dictate as order, they slaughter with impunity. They are absolute monsters to ensure that we understand they are not honorable, noble vampires. They're honorable according to their own set of morals, and it's very martially aligned. They strive for perfection in everything that they do, and Abhorash is at the peak, with Walach sitting just behind him underneath, because apparently he is almost, at this point at least, Abhorash's chosen child. Walach of House Harkon is the best. And it's made quite clear that when House Harkon gets broken up, when the blood dragons in the Empire get shattered by 4 entire groups of knightly orders coming together and having a big, huge shindig, big bang fight over at Blood Keep, that the blood dragons disseminate across the old world. So at this point, the blood dragons are kind of the source of most blood dragons you will find anywhere. But at the same point, any kid of Abhorash is also a blood dragon. We're sorted. We're all good. Great. Do you want to step in?
Yes, because Mr. Sean Schultz said, yes, Andy's favorite vampire family.
So family of vampires within, say, for example, one of the bloodlines. Ooh, that's actually kind of tough.
That's actually kind of tough because there are some that, like, a lot of people don't know. There's actually some decently established ones.
I'm going to come back to that after I've done my intro so I don't lose where I was.
Cool.
Okay,
then
so
carry on.
We're at 2001, the turn of the century. And it's a good 5 years before we really dive into any really new vampire detail. But even then, it doesn't add that much. For all, it's a big book, and that's the Liber Necris from Black Library. So in 2006, Liber Necris is released. This is by Marian von Stauffer, and he takes all of the existing vampire lore that exists and pulls it all together. And it's worth noting that Alessio Calvatore also did one thing here that very much is run with by Liber Necris, and that's tying in the Red Duke. Now, you might go, the Red Duke, I've heard of him. Who's he? He is a vampire. He was just a vampire to begin with. First introduced in this book set, which I happen to have with me, which is going a little bit weird.
It's a theory. It's an undead book. It's ethereal.
It's ethereal. Look at that. All the green of Morsleep is very much getting soaked up there. Circle of Blood. And Circle of Blood was released in 1997, before Blood Dragons existed. And in Circle of Blood, they tell the story of the Red Duke, a great Bretonnian vampire. We'll probably be going into the Red Duke a little bit later. We're obviously not going to go into huge detail because Red Duke, after all, is not the theme of the stream, but we will definitely be covering the Red Duke to a degree. But the Red Duke, to begin with, is not a blood dragon. He's just a vampire. And indeed, some of the things that the Red Duke does in Circle of Blood is not very blood dragony at all in the slightest.
He's more of like a blood dragon in name.
Yeah,
and
but
color.
His story is very Bretonnian. That much is certain. And the story that's put down in Circle of Blood, his origins down in Araby, how he became what he became, is all duplicated later. So they never truly change it. The Circle of Blood from 1997 is instead wrapped in. And some of the famous battles from here are mentioned in the various army lists that come later.
It is a good story.
Yeah, and they're also mentioned in the Liber Necris as well. So, like the Battle of Kerrin Field, for example, which is mentioned in there too. They also have a whole bunch of other fun, exciting details in there about blood dragons in general. For example, they add some extra details about Abhorash, about how much he was in love with Neferata back in the day, and that was the source of his acceptance eventually of not necromancy. Vampirism, acceptance and heavy things. He accepts it, but he fights to get out of it pretty much from the beginning. And it's also quite nice because it's got a nice little bit about Manfred von Karstein's opinion of the blood dragons, which basically is that they're dull, devoid of imagination, and really not worthy of the vampire name because they have no desire to make their mark on history. It's quite interesting to see Manfred's character coming out where he's very much, we are here to change the world, to do something big. We are the chosen leaders of humanity, and the blood dragons have completely turned their back on this.
What a von Karstein.
Yeah, he is a von Karstein to his core. Of that, there's pretty much no doubt at all. And he's turned his back on that. Now, summing all this up, again, we get our first proper Warhammer Fantasy roleplay dig into vampires. So in 2008, Night's Dark Masters is released for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition. And it takes everything that came from the previous versions of the Blood Dragons, wraps them all up in a nice little bow, and reiterates it without adding that much extra lore. Loosely speaking, what they say is that the Blood Dragons are this great knightly group of vampires that all trace their line back to Abhorash, and they are all looking to slay a bigger thing. Honor is exceedingly important. All of their special powers are, broadly speaking, around honor, extra attacks and combat, being martially proficient, and they can be found throughout all knightly orders in the old world. And this is a nice little, it's not a new addition, this has been suggested in the army list before, but it does very much lay down the idea that all of the knightly orders that you find in the Empire and the old world as a whole contain blood dragons here or there, secreted away, all looking to either find new blood dragons to bring into their effectively network of super hard close combat wombats, or alternatively looking for the next big challenge. And indeed, they offer 3 character details in there, as in 3 character profiles. One is the expected Walach, who is kind of underpowered. The next one is the Red Duke, who is kind of underpowered. And I say underpowered because one of my PCs was better than him when these set of stats was released. But this is a Warhammer Fantasy roleplay staple. People make stats for characters and they never quite get them as powerful as they perhaps should be. But they added a third character in there. I think his name's Tiberius Kale. And Tiberius Kale was a white wolf, used as an example of how all the orders kind of get infiltrated by the blood dragons. Tiberius Kale was just a white wolf who was looking to get the next biggest kill and was trying to train himself up to the point where he could take on a dragon. And he was, as far as vampires are concerned, a very approachable one. Because if you were someone of martial competence, he would have preference for you. He would not just kill you. If you could show yourself to be someone that was worthy of his time, he would give you time. And it was a nice way of characterizing that component of what the blood dragons are. They are not just merciless killers, although they are absolutely merciless killers. And so we've got this very clean idea of what blood dragons are by the late noughties. And Gav Thorpe comes along in the 7th edition and completely scrubs it clean, while simultaneously keeping it in place. Because the 7th edition is released in 2008. And the 7th edition of the army list gets rid of all the bloodlines. Now, you might go, wait a minute, no, there's Lamians. And there's... let me explain what I mean here. Gav mixes it up entirely. And what he does is he says all vampires are sourced from Neferata, right the way back in time. And they have very powerful vampires there who have had lots of kids, all of whom do sort of have bloodlines. But he mixes it up with a sort of, and they kind of mix up. And it's a bit complicated. And it's not as simple as you are a blood dragon, or you are a Lamian, or you are a Necrarch, or whatever else you might drop down for it. And they remove all of the bloodline rules. Instead, Gav replaces them with archetypes. And he says, you get ones who are martial, or perhaps dedicated to magic, or perhaps are dedicated to infiltrating courts, or whatever else it might be. And you can just give them these sets of skills. But you're not limited to this. You can take from any of the various types of powers that are available. The entire concept of a blood dragon is kind of not dropped, but it's muddied out a bit. It's anybody now can have the stats, capabilities, and skills of a blood dragon from any bloodline. And the blood knights that sort of fill up the slot where the blood dragons sort of used to be, instead are the martial blood knights that all get together and kick living bits out of other people, attempting to show their prowess in the battlefield. And that was a thing. There was, I remember at the time there was quite a lot of controversy about this, but the controversy wasn't in the way that many people would expect, because he didn't erase any of the background. He didn't say that the blood dragons didn't exist, that Abhorash or Walach or any of those didn't exist. What he said was basically there's vampire counts of all types. You can make up your own. You can use any power you want. And all of those old vampires that you're aware of still exist out there. And the sources of their blood is still there, but it's not necessarily as clean as you might think.
Yeah, funny enough, he kind of just took away like the easy cookie cutter stuff.
Yeah, he absolutely did. And he just made it a complicated Warhammer world, which is nice. But he also did one other thing, which I think very much shows what the Vampire Counts army was becoming. The only special characters in that book were von Karsteins. That's it. All other bloodlines were gone. They just didn't exist as far as the rules were concerned. By 7th edition, all we had was von Karsteins and rules that could be applied to von Karsteins. You could make your von Karstein a blood dragon or a Strigoi or anything else because the rules allowed you to do so. And indeed, the von Karsteins themselves, in many respects, changed as you find lots of their models become big, bloated, winged horrors. And the rules slowly but surely adapt, allowing all types of von Karsteins to exist. But the other lines don't really get this. We don't get ourselves subtle court blood dragons, for example, although the rules suggest that we absolutely have them, which is worth noting as we then pull out what becomes the last edition for the Vampire Counts, which was Phil Kelly's 8th edition army list, where he takes everything Gav did and copy-pastes it and gets rid of the archetypes. So we no longer have archetypes, we just have a page of powers you can choose from, and vampires can have any of them. And there's the story of vampire origins, which is the core vampires that we all know and love from Lamia back in the day, all the big vampires who eventually have lots of children, and their bloodlines are not a core component of what the book offers. Indeed, you could argue that by 8th edition, the concept of bloodlines is gone. It's an argument, though, because the opposite argument also stands, because none of the writing says that it's been overwritten. Instead, you've just got characters, individual vampires of certain bloodlines who perhaps may show the traits of those who created them, but may not.
Yeah, 8th edition.
Just to add something there?
Yeah, 8th edition took an interesting spin of that. They introduced units that represented the bloodlines as opposed to characters, which is not bad. It's just different. Where like they literally go like, oh yeah, your blood knights, those are your blood dragons. Yeah. Your Strigoi Ghoul King and your Crypt Horrors, those are your Strigoi stuff.
Ghouls.
Your new cool Coven Throne, Lamian thing. Yeah. Like they just kind of tossed in some scraps for the but once again, all the characters are either necromancers or von Karsteins.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I find particularly fascinating about this army list is exactly that, which I was about to say as well, which is that the bloodlines, instead of becoming the core components of the characters, became core components of the units. And they were represented there, and they were represented as part of a far bigger story rather than this is what vampires are. It's just, you've got these as well. On top of that as well, interestingly, the characters are not vampire counts, all of them. In fact, it's either Karsteins, Heinrich Kemmler, a necromancer, or Krell, who's an undead. It's literally not a vampire count set of special characters. And again, none of the characters that you would expect from all the other bloodlines are present. So by the time we hit 8th edition, the idea of all the other bloodlines is almost a 6th edition faded memory. Having said that, though, it isn't really, because all the lore is still there. And all of it is being brought back up in the units with the Blood Knights or with the units like the Coven Throne and similar. So all of it's still sort of being juggled about with. It just hasn't been landed with certainty with the special characters or with indeed even the characters. Now the vampires are just almost generic vampires like they were all the way back in 3rd edition and 4th edition of Warhammer.
One thing I actually want to add that is interesting as kind of, I think, a little addition capstone type thing to that is that what I find very interesting is that going into once it got its feet under it, once Age of Sigmar got into the Soulblight Gravelords, they'd gone back to the bloodlines are heavily separated character-wise. Like they are, you can't mix them. Like they're completely different sub-factions.
And that's fascinating. And when we eventually arrive at the post 8th edition, there's a few novels in this time. For example, Red Duke, I believe, gets himself a novel around right here, about 2011, somewhere like that. My favorite detail out of that is that Abhorash does indeed pop up inside that book wearing not blood red armor, but almost black midnight armor. But he casts no shadow. And I find that as a particularly fascinating tiny little detail. It's one of the few that I remember from the novel.
C.L. Werner wrote that.
Yeah, totally. And he casts no shadow, showing that he has not broken free from all vampiric curses, and that the part that he is broken free from is the original curse of having to rely upon blood and the blood thirst that comes with it. The thing that Abhorash himself was utterly horrified by, because he was a leader of men. He believed himself to be almost the classic philosopher king, warrior, general that ruled over the people. He didn't use the people in the way that the other vampires were doing. Abhorash was not that guy. And Abhorash is not free of the curse of a vampire. He's free of one part of the curse of the vampire. And it's shown clearly in that book that Abhorash is a vampire, but he is a vampire that has got away from one part of it, and he is looking for worthy others to do the same. And ultimately, as we reach the end of Warhammer's life and the end times, where Abhorash, Walach, who are they? Who cares? They're like incidental side notes throughout the course of the end times. You know, someone like Vlad and Karstein saying, yes, go tell Abhorash that. That'll be fine. Oh, will you go do that? Where is Abhorash? Fuck knows. Who cares? That doesn't matter. Do not think about too hard about Abhorash, because if he came on the field, he'd probably kill everything. So let's not think about that. He'd eat me for breakfast. But let's not consider that. As we end on, what do we have after eight editions of Warhammer and the world blowing up? What we have is a bloodline that definitely still exists at the end of Warhammer, but a bloodline that's been somewhat diluted as to its importance inside the Vampire Counts army list. If you want to say that there's one army that's important for Vampire Counts, one bloodline, pardon me, it's the Karsteins. They have been central to the Vampire Counts army from 7th edition onwards, but the Blood Dragons have not gone. And we have very clearly a group of vampiric knights that are the children of Abhorash and others. Walach being one of the most important of that group. And the Blood Dragons, although they were originally named after a knightly order up in the Empire, are completely rejigged to be a bloodline that are named for, effectively, their great hunt, the hunting down of a dragon and taking its blood to release themselves from the need of drawing blood from those around them. They, as one last point, skirt this weird line where on one hand, some writers are desperate to describe them as actually really honorable, desperate to get away from the blood curse, desperate to be better people. And the only way to do this is to follow in the footsteps of Abhorash, in the same way that, say, a Slayer might follow in the footsteps of Grimnir, because that's the right way to do it, almost like ancestor worship, because we know this works. And then the other side, they are bloodthirsty bastards who literally kill everything in their path and occasionally are a little bit honorable if they find someone who might be able to beat them. And you find that this vacillates with different writings. The core army list writings generally say, you know, they're desperately interested in martial prowess, and if they meet one that can match that, they might make you one of them. And they sort of forget the Abhorash storyline that sits behind it all, because that's not a core component of the unit on the battlefield, which is a kick-ass vampire who's going to eat you for breakfast. And that's largely where we are left today. Abhorash's bloodline and what it represents with blood dragons.
Yep. All right. So we're gonna get caught up on super chats, and then we got a lot to get through because there's actually quite a few stories involving blood dragons and things. We have a lot of history to get through. Let's see. We left off right around. Was it here? Stellar Rising. I would love to see character only polls. Also off topic, but are there any examples of the Chaos Dwarfs fighting High Elves? Yes, there's one. Which is actually in the Chaos Dwarf 4th edition army book, which is the Battle of Anural's Tomb. Fifth, whatever. The last one they got. And it features Chaos Dwarfs fighting a bunch of High Elves because there's a cool High Elf who died and got buried on the southern coast of the Darklands. And the Chaos Dwarves are messing with stuff, and the High Elves are trying to protect it. It's a pretty cool battle. I recommend reading it. You can find it online really easy in the Chaos Dwarf Army book, which you can also find really, really easy online. So, yeah.
You'll also find that they popped up quite a few times in Man of War as well, particularly when the Chaos Dwarves are added with the... it was a Plague Fleet or Seas of Blood that added the Chaos Dwarves. I think it was Plague Fleet. Whichever one it was, doesn't really matter. But they did mention a few there too.
Yeah. Darius Rose, Von Karstein equals Dennis. Lamian equals D. Blood Dragon is Mac. Necrarch is Charlie. Strigoi is Frank. And Charlie as well. That is all. Thank you for your contribution.
It's not bad.
It's not bad at all, actually.
It could be worse.
Yeah. Hannibal, afternoon, gents. Is Dragon Blood unique in curing vampires? If it's a case of raw magical infusion, surely Slaane's Dragon Ogre blood. So, okay. This is a great question because this is a matter of debate both inside and outside the universe that is never answered, and frankly, it probably should never be. Of what exactly went down with Abhorash? Of that Abhorash, without a shadow of a doubt, cured an aspect of his vampirism, which was the need to drink blood. Even though he is definitely still a vampire, he didn't go back to being human. He still has some of the cons and all of the pros. But as for what exactly went down, that it's genuinely a matter of debate. Of was it that it was just because it is most of the stories reinforce how big and old this dragon is. Like it's a big fucker. Yeah. Where it's a dragon that's so powerful that the only reason Abhorash even notices it at first is because the mountain it's resting on has like a corona of fire coming off of this thing. So it's like an emperor class bullshit dragon. And he fights it one-on-one, and he kills and beats it, drinks its blood, and he's cured. And some people look at that and they go, oh, well, dragon blood did it. And to be fair, this is reinforced by the story of Zacharias, who pulls off a similar feat, where Zacharias doesn't defeat a dragon. Instead, he just kind of accidentally fell asleep in its lair because he was so desperate. And it basically falls asleep on top of him, and he just leeches off of it like an absolute parasite, which I love about him. And he just drinks it dry. And it also makes him freakishly powerful and cures aspects of his vampirism. So that leans some credence. But it could be that it's not necessarily just these great, powerful ancient dragons. It could be that it just requires a creature of suitably magically charged blood, because you're right, those elder dragons do have really magical resonant blood.
My only additions to that would be that we are also aware that holy blood screws with vampires. Mm-hmm. And holiness is very strongly associated with Heish, the white wind of magic. A slan would probably kill a vampire, or most vampires, upon being consumed. A dragon ogre is in several places marked as being consumed by blood dragons and not working. Blood dragon ogres have been killed, but that's not saying the biggest dragon ogres wouldn't necessarily bring some additional benefit. As it stands, there is only pretty much a single example of it definitely working, and it's only with dragons. Yeah. So the answer appears to be, yes, it is indeed dragons only, and other species carry different types of blood. And not only that, though, different types of magical infusion. I imagine there'll be certain types of dragon that if you try to drain it dry, could completely mince you if you were a vampire. For example, one suffused with Heish, it very much could cause a lot of problems. Similarly, jade dragons, one suffused with the wind of life, could cause all manner of problems.
Probably would be a bad idea.
So your average forest dragon might actually be more of a problem than, say, for example, a gigantic red dragon. So yeah, there's definitely
or in the case of Zacharias, a black dragon.
Exactly.
Which,
black dragon's a perfect one for him, though.
Yeah. So it's an interesting thing. Yeah, funny enough, I agree with Andy about the slan thing. There actually been some notes from some writers that suggest that if vampires drink the blood of something that is too much magic, they almost like pop, or they get like really sick and they die. Like there are notes about like some vampires won't drink elf blood because it's too dangerous. Which is cool. Like it's just cool.
I think it works. It also shows why vampirism is, broadly speaking, a human condition.
Skythane, always wondered if the lady bearing the bloody grail from Nice Dark Masters page 51 was a blood dragon, a Lahmian, or a mix of both. Well, I happen to have the book open right now. Let's see. So she is so it's in the bloody grail. So that particular I mean, it's anybody's guess, but she is.
I'm gonna have to go look it up. I've got to my hard drive.
She's in the bloody grail art, which is Marovik's grail. You could argue she's probably a blood dragon because it's related to Marovik, and Marovik is very heavily implied to be a blood dragon, though I don't think it's strictly confirmed that he's one. I think it's suggested that he's one because nobody knows who did him, or gave him the blood kiss. I don't even know if Marovik had the blood kiss because I think it's the chalice that fucks him up originally. Like Marovik's very weird. Marovik is a weird dude. Like he's definitely a vampire. He is 100% a vampire, but how he turned into a vampire is very fucky.
Doesn't look like a blood dragon, does it?
No, it doesn't. But I feel like whoever made it wasn't thinking about it.
This feels like, I mean, it's in the blood dragon section. So,
but she doesn't look like a Lahmian to me. Like she's not.
I haven't read this book for ages. I'm half tempted to dive back in again.
I love this book. It's super good. Sitchmaster. That being said, Skythane, she could also be a mix. You are very true. She could just be a mutt because a lot of vampires are mutts, which we'll talk about. Sitchmaster, yes, the Dark Deeds game I played this weekend.
Dastardly Deeds. No. Dark Deeds, yay! I'm delighted you played Sitchmaster. I also played it just a few days ago, so good times.
Very good times. Dry.
Oh no.
Dry shake. Wet. Dry.
Shock.
I'm gonna call
Dry
you
shock, wet shock, dry shake.
I'm gonna call you Dry. Okay, Dry. Off topic. Where do you think Total War should create mini campaigns? Protagonist at the Lauren / Red Deck would be cool. Maybe Carrick freaking 8 Peaks. So I mean, there's a lot they could do. They've created some in the past where they did the One Eye campaign. That's one. It's mostly focuses around Kazarak and Boris. And they did the other one that was Bretonia, the Red Duke, and Athaloran, which was also quite good, and also had Beastmen. Those are fun. I don't know if they're going to do those again, to be honest, because I don't know if the community would be willing to pay for it. And if people aren't willing to pay for it, then there's really no incentive for them to do it. I would love any of these. I would love a mini campaign featuring the Black Plague, where like the Skaven are all over the place and you're playing as like Wood Elves and the Empire and dwarfs and stuff trying to deal with it. Or Carrick 8 Peaks would be perfect. Or I mean, there's a lot of potential, but I don't foresee this being something that CA themselves would do. Because I just don't think the community would want to buy it right now. Unfortunately. Dunman, so I imagine this depends on the other bingo card slot, but are there sub-bloodlines? All the vampires from one of the originals all share traits, but this also apply to ones beneath them. If one blood dragon was especially fast, its descendants would be 2. So, yeah, it depends on the author.
Yeah, and it's exactly that. Yeah. For example, the Harkon vampires are very much all very similar. They are all blood dragons of a particular type. Where you'll find blood dragons you find elsewhere are often significantly less honorable, depending upon the source and depending upon the writer. But yes is the answer to this. And yes, it does depend on the author to hand. Yeah,
because usually the thing that I notice is that an author will take one of 2 major roads, which is that a vampire's powers comes from whoever their mother or father in dark, whoever turned them, or it's a reflection of their personal skills and abilities that gets magnified. That's usually one of the 2 routes that you'll see them take.
Yep, seems fair.
Cameo. So is curing the thirst with dragon blood a closely guarded secret? Do the other vampires not care as much? Seems like the Lamians would know. So this generally depends on authors. But the best way I would describe it, in the way I've seen it handled in most books, is that if you're dealing with a blood dragon, they like to their core believe this like deeply. Like it's a fun foundational belief they hold. To a lot of the other bloodlines, it's more like a myth or like a rumor. It's something that they're like, okay, yeah, sure. But most even for a vampire, the average, even well on the crazy side of the spectrum, vampire, the idea of going, oh yeah, just track down and kill a dragon, it's gonna be like, yeah, go fuck yourself. I got better things to do. I'm not fighting one of those. It's a pretty like it's one of those things. It's like saying, you know how when we were growing up as kids with like video games, there would always be the rumors of if you do this really fucking impossible hard thing, you'll unlock Tails in Super Smash Brothers Melee. It's kind of like that kind of bullshit where I think a lot of the other bloodlines probably don't really believe it, but it's such a difficult thing to disprove. They're like, yeah, whatever. It's not worth arguing.
Yeah. I think the important thing here to add, Cameo, is that it's only happened once that we know of that's at all reliable. And even then, when we get to the truth of it, it could be a completely different story. You might find that if you were ever to look into the story of Abhorash, and if it were ever detailed in a far wider novel or something similar, it could end up being that the entire myth is a lie. Vampires, after all, are not known for being great speakers of truth. So it's a myth. So do others know about it? Yes. Do they believe it? Gods know. It's stupid. The blood dragons are seen as idiots by most of the other bloodlines because they are so focused upon this unachievable goal, and most of them die on the battlefield without any impact upon the wider world at all. They are effectively pawns for the other bloodlines as far as they're concerned, to be used because of their stupid, nigh on religious belief and their dependence on this ridiculous morality that, as far as the other vampires are concerned, is pure stupidity. So I think the answer to this one is, yeah, sure they know. In the same way that, you know, some people might believe this flying spaghetti monster doesn't make it real.
Yeah, yeah, especially because, I mean, if you think about it from other vampires' perspective, I would argue that most would probably suggest the most powerful thing that vampires get access to is the ability to use magic. Magic is kind of the top tier. It's like the best, most horrifying thing in the setting, and blood dragons just ignore it. Like they don't train in magic. They don't focus on it. The other, like,
I'll go
in
further.
a grand scheme, the blood dragons are like the weakest bloodline by far.
They're also the strongest, because if you ever play Warhammer, rather than just read the books, if you play the game,
they're absolute
vampires
beasts.
Absolutely kick ass. Magic, for all magic is nasty, can be dispelled by your mate over there and by a blood dragon anyway, because all of them have got the capacity to stop magic anyway. And they absolutely nail combat in a way that almost nothing else in Warhammer does. They take down almost everything in their path. I have played against vampires more times than I care to mention, and every time I faced a blood dragon, I was like, fuck, here we go. Here we go. How do I never get that into combat? How do I keep that unit away? How can I steer it somewhere towards a unit that doesn't matter, that can bog it down in close combat? Because I've, for example, like slayers or zombies or something that's immune to psychology, can just hold it in place. Because blood dragons are horrific. But in the greater overall scheme of things, that doesn't matter. In the greater Warhammer scheme of things, on the big story lore side of it, as far as most vampires are concerned, that's just a waste of your time. Your own natural capabilities are enough to kill most things. You don't need to hone them any further when there's other things you can hone that will bring far better advantages.
The end times has a lot of stupid scenes, and a lot of the build up to this particular scene is stupid, but there is a scene that genuinely made me laugh the first time I read it, which is that when Vlad von Karstein finally fights Walach Harkon and they have their big showdown, Wallach's riding a zombie dragon and he beats the shit out of Vlad, like absolutely just trumps him. And as he's about to finish off Vlad, they're talking, and Vlad's just kind of like, all right, I gotta go now, and just uses his magic to instantly take over the zombie dragon, which just turns around and bites Wallach's head off and just kills him.
Bullshit.
And Vlad's just like, yeah, you sucked at magic anyway, so I'm just gonna steal your pet. And it was very funny. It was a dumb scene, but it made me laugh really hard when I read it.
Yeah, it was not the best end for Walach.
But to be fair, he had fallen to corn by that point, so he was already like well past. He was well past the like. It was. I was fine with him dying at that point.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying but no.
Yeah. Shorin lives makes Strigos again. You sure, whatever, man. that's the Strigoi version of, oh yeah, totally, guys. Shorin's still out there. Elemental exposure, bringing back who would win? Need more Malekith storming the beach Normandy style against such your goodness. It's something we want to bring back. It's a discussion that has to be had. That's probably going to take multiple chats. Time.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
We'll get around to it. Donovan, I wonder if you could argue that the 8th edition is actually von Karstein army list. You absolutely could. With a lack of bloodlines such archetypes, because von Karstein seems to be a generalist with bloodlines. Von Ultramarines, if you will. Not an unfair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bluntly, yes, that's exactly the case. Where all of the other bloodlines are basically copies of the von Karstein core, the Ultramarines are, after all, the perfect Space Marine, and anyone that's following the strict codex as it's laid down would be following the template as laid down by the Ultramarines. So yes, I don't think that's an unfair assessment of where it ends up at the end.
The
Ultramarines don't invalidate all the other chapters.
Yeah.
The von Karsteins don't invalidate all the other bloodlines.
Yeah, because the most obvious version of this is if you go back to the 6th edition book, the last couple pages literally had rules about how to run each of the bloodlines as full armies. So you could run a Lawmian army and you got access to unique units, and they had points and stats and everything, and it was super cool. Sadly, that didn't make it out of 6th edition.
It does not stick. The Legions of the Dead, I think it was called. Can't remember.
Nagarash, finally, my favorite character. Super excited. Every RPG character I usually make ends up as a Blood Dragon-esque character with a big-ass sword. Very fair. I think you are not the only one. A lot of people love Blood Dragons. Nathan Hole, catching a stream almost live for once. No, we're live. When you posted this, we were live, so you're correct. Do any vampire characters have any known classic weaknesses, such as running water, compulsion count? Yeah. Yes, they do. Authors unfortunately like to forget that it's a lot of the fun with the vampires is that every vampire has unique weaknesses. They don't all share like they have some universal ones, like light or religious type stuff, which is basically just Heish magic, which makes sense. But a lot of them have very particular weaknesses. Like some of them cannot go into a space uninvited. Some of them can't cross running water. Some of them have a compulsion to count. Some of them can't go near like Wolf's Bane or Demon's Root. Some of them are terrified of garlic. Like it just depends on the individual vampire, which makes them very, very fun because your character, especially in roleplay sense, might think they have a foolproof way to deal with the vampire and it just doesn't work. Which is super scary when that happens.
Yeah, and this isn't contradicted by the later versions of it either. If we go all the way up to the 8th edition and the 7th edition, which largely use the same text, the vampires are cleanly marked as all being individual, generally being more powerful the older they are, but it speaks in mostly general terms. And when we go back to the books that focus on specifics, like say, for example, Night's Dark Masters, they make it quite clear that all vampires are, broadly speaking, individual. But if you come from certain bloodline, you're almost certain to share certain traits. And that hasn't really been changed in any of the books. So it's absolutely the case.
Necromancer Cobalt, I wonder if any vampire from any bloodline could cure the thirst with dragon blood. Is this a question GW would rather I not ask? I mean, I think you could, and depending on, I mean, it would depend on who you ask, and you would get different answers. Knowing GW, they'd probably give you kind of a non-answer to be more accurate, which is what they should do, in my opinion. But I will say it's happened twice, so it seems like a pretty reliable method. Though it does seem to need to be a very big dragon. It does not seem to just be any dragon. It needs to be a big one. Because once again,
possibly big and correctly magically aligned.
Yeah, like we talked about earlier. Because me and Andy have said, the lore plays around with it in really fun ways, and it's only happened twice to everyone's knowledge, despite all of the talk about it.
Both of those could be, upon deeper examination, rewritten into something else. So be aware, it is better to view this as a myth than it is a reality.
Yeah, maybe they both slept with those dragons. Maybe that was the secret.
Yeah, who can say what actually went down?
David,
I've defeated the dragon. Then boom, shika, wow, wow.
Yeah. You slayed the dragon, right? I laid it. Oh, you slayed it? Yes.
Yes.
That's why Abhorash left and never came back. No one could learn the secret. David, I'm not 100% certain, but are vampires immune to chaos taint? Is there a possibility of werewolves or ursanthropes being immune to chaos? So are vampires immune? That'll depend on who you're asking. Generally speaking, they are very resistant, but
so
it depends.
Loosely, vampires don't really mutate. Let's start with that. We don't end up having lots of mutant vampires. So along that side, the answer appears to be no. But could vampires get, say, for example, mental mutations, go fucking mental because of the influence of chaos? The answer to that appears to be yes, particularly if you look at the end times. When it comes to vampires, it appears that it's not so much that they are corrupted by chaos, it's more that they choose to go on the same side as chaos, which is completely different. It's far more elven in approach in many respects. They don't so much fall to the chaos gods, it's more they choose to align themselves with them because they share interests.
Yeah,
and that doesn't necessarily contradict how it is in the end times, although it sort of does a little bit.
The closest thing I can think to like genuine chaos taint is if like a vampire feeds on a particularly nasty chaos thing, and it can make them sick, like violently,
sick, really sick. That does pop up here or there, but again, that's not so much that.
But that's not really a taint.
That's the blood is corrupted, and it's just not good to them. And vampires are susceptible to whatever type of blood they take in, which is why they tend to be relatively careful as to whom they feed upon. The answer to this one is broadly yes. Specifically in individual examples, possibly not. But are there the possibility of werewolves and usanthropes and similar being immune to chaos? Possibility, yes. But many of the various werewolf types are in fact chaos worshipping or chaos leaning. So the answer to this is broadly no. They are as susceptible as everyone else to the taint of chaos. Vampires are relatively unique because of the nature of their soul.
Yeah, I could maybe see an argument for certain kinds of, like, if your lycanthropy or ursanthropy comes from like a very specific deific source, like the Children of Ulrich, maybe there could be an argument that they're a little more resistant to corruption than others. But
sure. Yeah, totally. I mean, some of them, sure. But broadly speaking, if you're just looking at it from the Sylvanian werewolf-like type creature, the sort that you might find down in Sylvania, the answer to that is, yeah, they're going to potentially be.
Corvus, hello. Thanks for joining us. Happy Pride.
Yeah,
moving on.
Thanks.
Skylar, would y'all be interested in doing a Jade Bloodline research slash creation stream? That could happen at some point. There's a lot to do before I'd want to do that, but that is something we could do at some point, sure.
Yeah.
I would want to have someone on with us, like how we did kind of like the Koresh stream and stuff. I would want to have someone come chat with us that has a better understanding of Eastern vampiric mythology, which is not my specialty at all. I don't know jack shit about that. Donoman, I will counter by saying most Harkons are quite similar, even before the Luzerman artifacts. Luther. Okay, this is actually a funny thing. So
well,
the Harkon, yeah. So there is a bit of of that when most people say the Harkons, they're talking about Walach Harkon and the people he spread. It is a very popular there's a fuzzy realm around Luther Harkon where nobody really knows what he is. They're now in Luther Harkon's own stories, they have handled this well, where Luther is batshit fucking insane. And he gives multiple origin stories. And one of Luther's origin stories is that he originally comes from Lamia and that he was one of Abhorash's favored get.
Yeah.
And if you look at the original Abhorash story, Abhorash did have 4 disciples that he took with him into the north, one of which was Walach, and we don't know the other 3, but one could have been Luther. But we don't know that it's Luther. It just is certainly possible it was Luther. But we don't know.
Yeah. I think the answer to this is that if we are being absolutely fair and we accept that he's most likely one of those 4, he's not a Harkon. He just uses the name probably as a thumbing his nose or biting his thumb, if we go Shakespearean, over towards Walach and everything that he represents. He might now believe he's a Harkon because that is the nature of that very insane vampire. But I would suggest that it's most likely that he's probably not.
I think, there is potentially a very cool untold story about where Walach even put the name up from. Because I have a hard time believing that Walach Harkon is his original name. If he's from Lamia with Abhorash, he probably had a very different name originally. So if he took on that name,
it's a very empire name.
Yeah, why that name? And if he did, if he was with Abhorash's other disciples and they all took the Harkon name as some kind of sign of brotherhood or what have you, there could be a really cool story behind that. But we have no idea. It's never been detailed.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that the Vampire Coast vampires are basically a separate bloodline to the Harkons, the Blood Dragon vampires from Bloodkeep over in the Empire.
Oh, yeah, they're wildly different.
Completely different bloodlines with very different expressions. Do they both share the Harkon name? Yes. Are they all Harkon vampires as described as the Harkons? Absolutely not. Whatever's going on with the good old Vampire Coast is a very unique expression.
I will say, there could be a very fun in-universe story of a vampire masquerading, like a pirate vampire masquerading as a Harkon vampire, and it causes a whole thing in the kind of vampire underworld of the Blood Dragons getting pissed because of how this guy's acting. But it turns out he's being completely honest, but he's the other kind of Harkon.
I'm just going to bring up this one because we don't speak of the Nagash books.
That could be the case. Like that could be the case. That is a version of the story you can run with. I loathe those
Harkoni
books.
Is one of the least Nehekara names I've ever heard.
Yeah,
but sure.
Yeah, one of these days I'm going to do a full rip apart of that book as a video, which is that trilogy, because my God, it's terrible.
But thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely spot on. But nevertheless, we often forget on purpose that they exist.
Charles, vampires are weak to holy stuff because of the Sigmar / the gas curse, right? Yes and no. Or does raw hish hurt them? Yes. Both? Yes. Are eating a slime killing them? Possibly.
Yeah. Hesh magic, the extreme purity and holiness of it is something that can harm vampires. It is also something that deeply harms demons. It deeply harms things that are a bit different from the standard that the mortal realms
Elementals,
offers. Yeah, so yes, it's definitely a thing that can. You'll find though that most writers not only forget about this, they just don't know it. Because most of the writers for Warhammer don't even understand how the 8 winds of magic work. And they have to have somebody come along and say, maybe you should rewrite that bit to ensure that the winds of magic are mentioned. And they go, oh, yes, I will. And an editor makes a proper amendment to the text to ensure that it's mentioned. But in this case, if we're just looking at the lore as a whole, rather than individual writers and the stories they tell, the answer to this is, yes, I should. And yes, eating a slam that's absolutely suffused with that and more would cause deep problems.
Yeah, but you are also correct that Nagash did curse the vampires about Sigmar specifically. Like Nagash inflicted them with well, you guys abandoned me. Fuck you. If you're ever dealing with Sigmar stuff, it's gonna suck for you.
It's he's truly fascinating curse in terms of the actual enormous amount of power that it would take to do that when he was in a weakened state. It's almost certainly, if you look at it, a myth.
Oh yeah,
because the actual truth of the ability to do that, because it is tough. But
I will say
it's a myth that believes true.
I do deeply love that being like the last thing Nagash does. Of instead of like cursing Sigmar or the humans, he turns all of his spite of vampires and blames.
Which is crazy because at this point he's not even a god.
Yeah, no.
You know, he's not a god yet. Why would his name do anything? It would be a name that would be forgotten throughout time, but he becomes a god later. In many respects, there's an untold story here concerning the crown of Nagash, I reckon.
And that's also a very good point. It actually probably has to do with Sigmar himself, not Nagash. But well, I mean, technically. But because Grant McNeil also takes an interesting spin on it, where it's not Nagash that curses them, it's kind of Sigmar that curses them without meaning to.
Yeah, totally.
Anyway, Martin Crescent, beautiful blood drinking knights focused on perfection. Ah, the blood angels. I mean, dragons. Yeah. Terry Rose, if Angel from Buffy was in Warhammer World, would he be a blood knight? Same for Spike and Drusilla. Also, how would Angel get along with Ulrika? I vaguely remember these names from my childhood.
So I remember them all, and I don't really think they fit into the Blood Knight mold at all. None of them are particularly interested in any of that. They're all a bit, almost freak show hammer horror vampires in terms of how they present themselves, particularly when they're without their souls. So you're probably looking at your more classic vampires. They're closer to Lamians in how they present and hide behind society and pull strings. So I'd say it'd be more likely to be Lamians. And how would Angel get along with Ulrika? He would have sex with her like he has sex with everybody else. Because such is Angel's way. I mean, no, he's pure, man.
I mean, yeah, keep in mind that blood dragons, they're kind of like hyper-focused nerds almost, in that they don't fit in well with society. They just don't. Blood dragons do not tend to blend in to human society. They're wanderers.
Although many of them are still sticking in knightly orders, according to some descriptions. So some of them,
there are some,
but most of them are wanderers looking for a perfection of their skill so that they can take one more step closer towards being able to take out a dragon.
Yeah, a lot of them kind of embody the whole, like, well, you were chatting with women, I was studying the sword meme. That's a lot of the blood dragons. Phil, Warhammer is a war game, and thus most aspects revolve around war, the vampire bloods being a prime example of it. How difficult is it to adapt them to different contexts?
So actually, I think you've got a point here, and it's one of the reasons why the von Karsteins become almost the central line, because they are the great gatherers of forces to attack others. They are, in many respects, the Warhammer version of vampire. When you look at the Lamians, they're working from behind the scenes. They don't normally lead empires, lead armies, which is why they're a little coven thrown extra as we hit the 8th edition. If you look over at basically all the other bloodlines, they're not really broadly speaking, generals, although individually they may gather armies at some points. So it's no great surprise that the von Karsteins become the core component of what the vampire counts are. So I think you've definitely got a point, while simultaneously I would always like to have the option of having the others too. And the army lists at 8th edition allow that, because your vampire free vampire, I'm going to choose a vampire option in 8th edition, for example, can be of any bloodline you want, or of a new one if you wish, and you just choose whatever powers you want and slot them on. So the game allows for all options, but does indeed fixate upon the von Karsteins, and I think it's understandable.
When I was reading through the 6th edition book earlier this morning, just to refresh my memory of some things, it's actually kind of funny how much it sort of goes to links on all of the non-von Karstein lines to be like, generally, these guys aren't out there leading giant armies, but sometimes they do. But that's not really what they do. Like, it does go out of its way to say that for pretty much all of them, except the von Karsteins.
Yeah, pretty much.
Jesus, do vampires feast on human flesh as well? Generally, no, but it's not...
Corpse-eating Strigoi, perhaps.
Yeah, Strigoi sometimes, or will, generally. And if a vampire, like, gets really fucked up and ends up turning into, like, a Vargulf or a Vargeist, they might get into it. But it's more because they're such messy eaters and they're trying to get at the blood.
Yeah, generally speaking,
they don't need to. It doesn't,
absolute no.
Yeah, it doesn't do anything for them.
Yeah.
My best answer to you for that would be like, do you eat the outside of every fruit? If you eat fruit, like, do you eat the outside of the orange peel, right? Or like the lemon skin and all that stuff? Or do you get it out of the way and get to the good stuff, right?
Sure.
Donovan, slightly off topic, but are there any pre-von Karstein characters of that bloodline? In other words, children of Vashnesh. So Manfred is pre-von Karstein.
Yeah, he is.
There are a number of them. We just don't know a lot about them. It's not covered.
So the answer to this is that there were frickin' tons of vampires that were created by the line of Vashnesh during the time of the Gash and his great wars against Nehekara. And I mean a lot
Rounds of the Ice Queen actually has an entire family that's that's descended from Vashnesh before he becomes
Vashnesh before, yeah. And there were loads of them. They were the primary component of much of the armies that Vashnesh himself was leading. The poor old vampires having to effectively kowtowed before Nagash because they were in such difficult times. So are there any survivors of that? The answer is absolutely yes, all over the place, throughout the old world and beyond, and we just need them detailed at some point by one writer that comes along. It would not be a surprise to find a child of Vashnesh sitting, like, I don't know, sitting over by Cathay somewhere, or having arrived in Lustria, or some other equivalent. They're going to be out there, but they're not really detailed anywhere in any great degree.
Christopher Clayton, I ate a dragon. You drank its blood?
Yes.
That is totally what I meant by that. Ricky Chapman, we love the Blood Dragons. We have had at least 2 great encounters with them in Wolfrup, once as an antagonist in our Chaos campaign, and again in our Undead campaign. They do make for excellent baddies, especially because Blood Dragons, granted, depends on the author, but they're pretty high up on the list of vampires you could realistically fight with a group of PCs and they won't necessarily kill you. There's a whole story in the there's a story in the 6th edition book. There's a 2-page spread story that's very fun about a knight, I think named Landuin, that fights a blood dragon, and he gets his ass just absolutely handed to him. Like, the blood dragon spanks him, but blood dragon doesn't kill him. He literally puts him back on his horse.
Back another day,
and he says, "Hey, you've got potential. Go train a bunch, and when you're good, come find me." And then he sends him off.
It's a classic blood dragon encounter. Most vampires, contrary to many people's expectations, make great Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay NPCs, because most of them are doing something that is either going to be investigated by or perhaps looked into by a group of PCs. And sometimes some groups just prefer an outright combat, and there's nothing quite like having a blood dragon come along and completely spank the party. But as is often the case with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, you've effectively got Mario extra lives with your fate points, so you won't lose, but he will absolutely beat you, which is great because we can have those stories, much like the one that Sotek mentioned over the Bretonnian, it was in the Vampire Count's army list, where the Bretonnian is absolutely handed his ass, but they were so impressed by his, let's say his daring,
moxie,
his moxie, exactly. The blood dragon went, yes, you keep going, and I want to meet you later. And it's almost a threat as well. I'm coming back for you. I have high expectations, so you better train, because if you don't, I will kill you next time. And that makes for a fun story as the player character begins to panic. The poor PC sitting there going, oh shit, he's coming back. And 2 years later, he's sitting there doing his special exercises, some desperate attempt to hold off this horror who absolutely not just took him out, but the entire group that he was with, and left them shattered and broken.
Yeah, I wasn't
a fun wee story.
Yeah, vampires are very fun antagonists, especially if you have kind of power gamer PCs, because they're really good at fucking with power gamer parties. Especially because vampires are super dramatic. So it's actually really easy to come up with reasons why they won't kill a party, because they're so over the top. They're very over the top characters.
Oh, I love a vampire.
Charles C.K., do we think Shukengun can become vampires? If so, are they affected by their own draconic bloodline? That's an awesome question that I don't think we have an answer to.
And I don't think we have an answer. And I think this would be at the core of what I would start considering as a first step towards one of the many J-blooded potential bloodlines. I agree. Because I think the answer to this is probably yes. And that makes for a fascinating potential outcome. Because why would you want to limit that particular potential as a storyline? You wouldn't. And I love the idea of the potential mixture of dragon and human, which we know already does work with vampirism. They are semi-compatible because of the blood dragons. We know they are not necessarily antithetical to each other. So I quite like the idea of a dragon-blooded Shugengun.
Yeah, I would say the answer is probably yeah. I would agree with Andy 100%.
Yeah.
Phil, on a completely unrelated note, I was wondering if you were aware that GW writers laid down the ground to flesh out Chaos Undivided by laying down 4 etheric domains, as they call them, along with the 4 ones represented by the usual Chaos Gods and a random Horus Heresy free PDF released a couple of years ago of all places. The Battle of Onmat, it's called. I mean, Horus Heresy, whatever. I'm not going to read it. I'm sorry. I'm just going to be blunt. I got other stuff to do.
It's not unfair. I might go check it out though.
When and if it comes to fantasy, hit me up. But until then,
Battle of Onmat.
Dynaman, it would be funny if Luther's genuine pre-vampirism name was his actual human name was Luther Harkon, but he wasn't actually converted by Walach. He's just from the same family that Walach adopted the name of. So despite not being a true vampiric Walach in life, he was actually a true Harkon. That could also be a very funny story.
That could very much be the case.
Tank Matter, salutations, gents. One of these days we'll get the Ariel Ryan stream we need but don't deserve. As always,
one day,
one day. Stay tuned is what I'll say. From Eggman, a vampire going the D&D bard meme route, eh? Yeah, you're not, popular. Watchdog 3079. Which progenitor vampire would have the biggest murder boner for Nagash? Neferata. So Neferata fucking hates him. The others don't like him. She hates him. The others don't. Actually, easiest way to explain it: when every time Nagash is about to come back to life, the others don't do jack shit. Neferata actively tries to stop it every single time. She hates his guts. Absolutely hates him. Holy Irons, guys, give me your honest opinion on Abhorash's character as a secondary their martial character that could beat Abhorash. Okay, so very briefly, I'll say that I like Abhorash. I think he tends to be a bit overrated by a lot of people because I don't think he's as important to the core setting as a lot of people want him to be.
That's the truth. No one's ever bothered with him, really.
Yeah, he completed his story arc and he fucked off.
Yeah,
that's the story of Abhorash, which is great. It's a good story, but I don't really care about him in the modern setting, like the era of Karl Franz or whatever, because he's not relevant until the apocalypse is when he should come back. Which he kind of did, but they did it off screen for some fucking reason. So outside of the end times, I don't care. I don't care about him. I don't think he's relevant. I'm much more interested in what his kiddos are up to. And is there a martial character that could beat him? Yeah, but it's a tiny list. He is the best martial vampire. Next to the only one I could see theoretically, martially, he's the best. The only type of vampires I could see being on his level are the other tops of their respective bloodlines. So like Manfred, Neferata, and Zacharias.
That he'd eaten for breakfast in combat, though.
Oh yeah,
Utterly
combat. I
destroyed
just
him.
mean like
Yeah.
general scariness.
Yeah, and we're talking about martial characters, as in we're talking about close combat, and we're not talking about magic or any of the rest of that. Abhorash as a character is best handled as that thing that lies beyond and is not necessarily a character you're dealing with, largely because as a vampire, he's not actually that interesting in the greater story. However, when it comes to the end times, he absolutely is interesting. I'm rather disappointed that he wasn't used.
Yeah, canonically, he's only lost once, I'm pretty sure, in his entire life. So
yeah. And he has had millennia. Loosely speaking,
he's gotten better, yeah.
Yeah, I am not convinced that there is any character who could beat Abhorash in a very simple fight. If we're just talking Warhammer stats, he's like weapon skill 10. He's as high as you get. He's got at least 6 attacks at a base level. Yeah, he may not be frenzying as a general coordinate greater demon may be doing, but he's going to have magical artifacts on top of that. He's a proper monster. There is no one that you could easily say would beat him. But equally, there's a whole bunch of top tier characters that you may say, yeah, but no one's going to beat that one. He's at the top tier. It's that simple.
He is an S+++.
And whoever he fights is going to be down to the story being told as to who wins if it's against another top tier character. Some greater demon of Khorne, some perfect champion of Khorne, for example. They may have a chance, but it would be a fight. The most powerful, greatest of dragons or dragon ogres, he can one-on-one them. And that's extraordinary. An Aryan in his prime when he's a god. We're talking one-on-ones, and who knows who's going to win. There is no they will beat. It's just top tier and story decides.
Yeah, genuinely, his only weakness is that canonically...
I'm just going to bring this one up. No, he'd eat Archaon, but Archaon's got more than just himself. He's magic. He's his forces. He's much more, but it's just a one-on-one fight. Abhorash is probably going to win.
Abhorash is the perfect character, in my opinion. He is the perfect character that demonstrates how bullshit magic is. Because when you understand that Abhorash is genuinely the GOAT, but if you're putting him in a realistic scenario on like a big battlefield, there are characters that would absolutely fuck him up because magic is just that goddamn scary.
But let's be honest, he can stop magic to a degree.
Yeah.
But yes, if we're just talking martial, he's top tier. But the Warhammer world is not just about that, though.
Yeah. But yeah.
I'll call this one out. Yeah, Malekith, he'd eat him for breakfast.
Malekith.
Okay, Shadowblade and him might have a bit of a fun because Shadowblade's weapon skill 10. At least he can go toe to toe with him. But he's weak in comparison because this is a vampire we're talking about. They have got top tier physical stats as well. Elves don't. They're sitting like strength 4, strength 5 at maximum.
I don't think anyone could.
Vampires at strength 7 and 8. It's ridiculous.
I don't think there's any character y'all could name that could genuinely just like beat him. Like there are characters that could fight him, but there's nobody that could beat him.
Yeah,
in a martial pursuit. Curtis, hi, Lorebeards. I truly love vampires. And I wonder if CA will possibly make a Champions DLC style in vampires. It'd be awesome. I think it's kind of unlikely for some fair reasons people have pointed out to me of that. It is a lot of content that would only really go to one faction unless they somehow manage to include like Tomb King and Vampire Coast stuff in it. In which case it could be for like all the undead. But that means I have to go back to the drawing board and kind of redo my proposal, which I'm happy to do and am planning on. Nathan Huel, you're live. I'm catching up. So to follow clarification of my weakness question, do we know any... Oh, okay, that's actually a fun question. Do any of the special named vampire characters we know have a unique weakness? Yes. The most famous one is the Red Duke. So the Red Duke is... Well, and kind of Walach Harkon as well. But the Red Duke has a very particular form of problems. He's really fucked up because he got trapped in his tomb and it was a really bad time where he was just starving for like hundreds and hundreds of years in the dark by himself, going just batshit insane. And that was after he went through a whole bunch of traumatic stuff and he's died twice. So when he finally got out, he was not in good shape. And he has like kind of a weird form of almost Alzheimer's, where he kind of forgets where he is. Well, he thinks he's he knows where he is, but he thinks he's like in the past as opposed to in the present, which causes him to make really weird mistakes. But the Red Duke novel, which I would recommend reading, introduces that he does have a profound weakness, which is basically, which we'll kind of talk about a little bit, because we're going to have to hurry a little bit, but thank you all.
Well, we are. Look at the time.
Support. But he has the best way I could say this is he has a weakness to nostalgia. And you may go, I don't understand what that means. And the best thing I could say is go read the book. It's a very good book. He has an emotional weakness, and it fucks with him really badly. That's probably the best one I can think of. I don't know about any of the other ones having weird ones.
Yeah, you find that most of the special characters have weaknesses that are not necessarily tied in, because they often, when it comes to Warhammer, especially when you look at the battle game, they don't like creating problems. They like keeping it nice and easy. Yeah. So they don't go into the details saying this character is weak because of X, Y, or Z. But you tend to find, for example, the von Karstein vampires are always fighting at night, and they're camping during the day.
Yeah, I will say, it is very funny to imagine them introducing, like, look, here's Zacharias the Ever-Living. By the way, if there's a water terrain feature on the board, you can't cross it. Like, that would be
so I'm just going to bring these up because I feel like I have to. Okay? He'll eat him. He will eat him. He will eat him. And probably eat him. And there's a reason for this, because we have stats for most of these. We know what they're like. We know what they can do. We even know, when we look at the lore side, what they can do. And none of them have weapon skill 10. None of them have high enough strength to cope with them under most normal circumstances. He's a full-fledged first-generation vampire combat wombat. He's actually mental, but in Warhammer, it's never about just one-on-one, because it's always about the story. If we had a story of it, Grimgor, because he has got plot armor through the wazoo, would almost certainly hold his own against Abhorash. But if we actually look at what Grimgor is, he wouldn't. He'd be eaten for breakfast.
Yeah, Abhorash is there is nobody that is better than him in a vacuum in martial pursuits. Yeah. There just isn't. Period.
I mean, Grimgor's only weapon skill 8, strength 5, toughness 5.
Yeah.
He's weak in comparison.
When you put him into realistic scenarios against these characters, suddenly there starts to be a lot more shit going on. And that's where Abhorash genuinely struggles, which I'm going to explain to you now. So sit, wait a second, allow me to explain. This is a perfect segue. So the Blood Dragons, because we're halfway through this damn episode, we have barely started. So the Blood Dragon vampiric bloodline, like Andy said, before they were Blood Dragons, we go way back to Lamia. The Blood Dragons have Abhorash as the big daddy, who we're going to talk about briefly for a little bit before we kind of talk about where the bloodline has gone. Tyrion would not have a fun time. And so one of the core things that sets the Blood Dragons apart is Abhorash's origin as a founder, which is that there are two different versions of the story, but both of them are very tragic, which is that either A, Abhorash catches the eye of Neferata. This is the older version of the story. She catches his attention, and she's like, oh, that captain of the guard's looking real good. Get him over here. And they kind of start having a thing. And she tricks him into drinking the elixir of life. He has no idea what it is. He doesn't know what it does. She just commands him to do it, and she is his queen, so he does it. And it's horrible. It's almost kind of like a form of assault. It's really bad, and it does some terrible stuff to him, which I'll talk about in a second, because both versions realign here. The second version of the story is that Abhorash has always been Neferata's. I actually really liked their romance because it's a classic version of oh my god, I can't remember the term for it. It's the type of romance that was brought back from the Middle East and France, was like, oh, this is the goat, and they did a lot of Arthurian stuff where it's never consummated.
Oh, right, yes, that.
Yeah, I can't. There's a term for it, but I can't remember the term. So love that's never fulfilled. So you love from afar, you pine for each other, but you never actually do anything. That's Abhorash and Neferata's love, which makes it like courtly romance. Yeah, courtly love. Yeah. So, and it's very sad, especially from kind of our perspective. But they had this Abhorash is so noble, and he takes his job so seriously that he never really makes any severe advances, and Neferata kind of just likes playing with her food, to put it very bluntly. And but and in this story, he kind of knows what the elixir is, but she still commands him to drink it, and he does because he loves her, even though he doesn't want to. But regardless, he drinks it. He goes through the transformation into a vampire, and he realizes that this is really fucking bad because he has turned into a monster. And he's of the original 7 that we know of. He is the only one who has a horrible internal turmoil about this. He does not want to be a vampire at all.
No, I don't think that's true. I think it would be better to say he does not want to be drinking of the blood of his people.
That's fair.
The aspect of it that the other vampires are very much enjoying because they are in power and they can use their people for eternal life is not something that Abhorash likes. He thinks it's abhorrent. He turns his back on it. The idea of using your people as fodder in such a fashion as cattle is absolutely against everything that he stands for. Yeah, the captain of the guard, eventually the entire general of all Lamia, he does not like the idea of using his troops in such a fashion and will not allow that to.
Because it looks cool. That's literally the answer. I can't. Man. Dark magic, I guess. But it looks cool. They shouldn't. The answer is they shouldn't.
Because reasons.
Because it would make them stand out like a sore thumb. And they're supposed to blend in generally. But anyway, so Abhorash, because of his moral code, which the whole thing about him is he has a super strict moral code. That is like his whole thing. Abhorash refuses to drink any blood, and he kind of fucks up. Because if you've read any Warhammer story or any vampire story ever, newly turned vampires tend to be kind of feral. And Abhorash's thirst grows and grows and grows, but he resists it for a hot minute. I think he lasts like a week or something. But he lasts for a really long time.
I seem to recall that he just goes mental, doesn't he?
Yeah, he breaks. He just utterly breaks.
Yeah.
Totally. So he resists it for as long as he can, and then he snaps. And he, instead of just feasting on someone, he brutally murders 12 men and women that he knew. It wasn't like random people. These were people he knew and like loved and were close to him. He brutally massacres them. It like the description is that he literally rips them all apart. It is like a complete bloodbath, and he just feeds on them. And then he comes back to his senses because he's fed. And he is disgusted with himself.
Yeah,
utterly.
Absolutely.
And like Abhorash takes it so poorly that the next day after he kind of like cleans everything up and like is punishing himself, he literally lights 12 candles every day or every year on that day. He always lights 12 candles in remembrance of the people he massacred. And from this point forward, he refuses to, unlike the other vampires, he refuses to feast on the people of Lamia. Instead, he leaves the city and he goes and attacks like random raiders and desert tribe folk. Like he still feeds on people, but he goes to feed on strangers from somewhere else. And Abhorash, very interestingly, tries to introduce a set of laws to Lamia for the vampires. He tries to convince them that, hey, you know, to like maintain secrecy and make sure like things don't get out of hand and yada, 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 we should only feast on people that we know. We shouldn't feast on anybody from anywhere else. And we should only feast on criminals and prisoners of war and like people that are not ours. And all the other vampires are like, haha, fuck you. Can't tell us what to do, you bitch. And Abhorash fucking hates them. Because, big spoiler, they make a mess. And the mess is so loud and so obvious, it not only attracts Nagash's attention, but eventually attracts the Priest King's attention.
Yep.
And all of Nehekara unifies under this new kid, this Alcatazar the Conqueror, who brings a big old army through the mountain pass. And Abhorash, to his credit, performs amazingly. Like Abhorash holds them for a really long time. But the problem is Abhorash has the classic vampire problem, which is that he can win any fight that he is in personally, but he can't be everywhere at once. And the priest
can't fight during the day.
Yeah, can't fight during the day. Yeah, that is also a huge part. and the priest king
causes the central temple to collapse.
Yeah, there is a fuck ton of them, and they just push them back and back and back and back until the city itself is burning. Lamia is on fire; it's collapsing. He tries to defend the central, the Temple of Blood, which is at the center of the city, with Neferata, and they fail. And
I think it's worth adding one extra little detail here for his character, just to make sure that we grab it. Abhorash loves Lamia. He loves the city, and he believes that vampires can be, with the proper laws and the proper constraints, a force for what he perceives to be honor and good. And he thinks that Lamia is almost a perfect expression of what a city can be. And for all it has its problems, it is changing, as far as he's concerned, to the better. And seeing everything that he loves come burning down absolutely destroys him. It does not land well. He loved that city. And to see it be destroyed in such a fashion, if anything, reinforced his beliefs that the honor aspect of his character was required, because it was the fact that they weren't controlled that allowed the vampires to be seen for what they were, allowed the attack and Al-Qadazar to do what Al-Qadazar does to happen. So it reinforces his position and also reinforces his disgust at some of the other vampires too.
So, Face Octopus, funny enough, the answer is yes, but in these stories about it, the vampires can't fight during the day. Like, the original elixir has the sunlight weakness.
Yeah, the story of the curses is kind of self-contradictory, and at
which
different
I think
points
works. I think works really well.
Yeah, it does. The stories of Nagash and the curses that are myths.
Yeah,
they are better understood as myths than they are understood as core stories, because there's multiple examples where they just aren't true. And all the stories and pretty much every edition has the vampires of Lamia inside their temples, sleeping during the day. The sun scorches them and makes them feel deeply uncomfortable to the point of burning them up. And that gets worse and worse as time goes on. To begin with, they can stand it a little bit, but as the time passes, it gets worse. So yeah, those curses are in place early.
Yeah, I think if you go back and check out our Lamia stream, or maybe it was the Mortark's tier list, we also talked about that in many of the original versions of Nagash's supposedly perfect elixir of life, they also suffered from the whole sun problem.
They do. To the point that we concluded in that what Lamia created was not a cursed version of the... She actually did it. And arguably a better version than what Nagash had. Nagash just furthers what he did with time afterwards. Yeah. But what Lamia did was pretty much impressive.
Yeah. So anyway,
not Lamia. Sorry, what Neferata did.
Neferata,
what happened in Lamia? Sorry.
Yeah. So at this point, essentially, so the Lamia completely collapses. The army of the priest kings destroy it. They level they don't raise it to the ground, but they fuck the city up big time. And Abhorash, this is a key part of his character because, like Andy said, he loves Lamia so much. I think the only character that could possibly be argued to love Lamia more than him is Neferata herself.
Neferata,
and that's it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And this moment, Abhorash basically makes a declaration in his fury that he hates humanity. He despises them for taking his home from him because he blames humanity in general. Though he also is really pissed at the other vampires, which we'll get
I think it's also there's another point that's worth noting as well. He considers this to be a personal failure because he lost. He loses this war. He has failed as a warrior. His beloved city has been burnt to the ground, and he is responsible. So while all the other vampires are pissing it off and grabbing what magical artifacts they can and taking treasure and hiking out to the mountains, he's doing something very different. He's going on his own personal quest. And he decides at this point that now it's become personal. He needs to find out what is important for him. And he heads off with not all the magical artifacts in the world, but with trappings of war. He covers himself in armor and weapons and takes his 4 closest disciples with him and heads off, not to go and try and refound Lamia, not to go and try and take control of humanity, but to perfect himself, to be better so that something like this can never happen again.
Yeah. From here, we'll fast forward over a lot of things because we're really just focusing on the development of the Blood Dragons. So we're going to skip over everything that happens with the Gash because Abhorash does kind of show up, but he doesn't really do a whole lot. It's more about Vashnesh and Neferata and stuff. So, Vashnesh dies, the vampires scatter. And at this point, Abhorash did get an addition to his story fairly late in Warhammer, which is a cool addition, which is that he kind of wanders for a while, but he actually ends up going to Stragos. And to Morkane. So because Ushoran basically Ushoran does what none of the other ones are willing to really do at this point, because they weren't sure if Nagash was still around. And Ushoran finally finds the Crown of Sorcery. He's like, oh, he's dead. Okay, I'm gonna make a new empire. And he tries to recreate Lamia in what we now know as the Badlands. And near like the Marshes of Madness and everything.
And we all know what's going to happen given his current name.
Yeah.
The Badlands.
But Ushoran, to his credit, who used to be very arguably the most petulant of the original vampires, has grown a lot. And he's like, no, we're going to do this right. And he tries to call out to his brothers and sisters and say, hey, I'm trying to recreate Lamia. You should come join me. Most of them ignore him. But Abhorash and Wazoran initially answer him. They both show up. And Abhorash shows up and goes, okay, what's the situation? And Ushoran goes, Abhorash, you were right. You were right. We need to do it your way. Will you be my great general? And will you teach me your philosophy and help me run this nation? Abhorash goes, okay, I'll try this again. I'll try this one more time. So they do, and initially it goes really well. Stragos becomes a flourishing nation and does really, really well. And then, to put it very bluntly and to cut a lot of extra story out, Neferata is a petty bitch. And she decides, fuck this. And she orchestrates a masterful decapitation.
Orchestrates.
Yeah. So, Ushoran and Abhorash are busy because of Neferata's manipulations fighting a war against barbarian tribes in the north. And while that's happening, a big Waaagh shows up of a bunch of savage orcs, and Abhorash and Ushoran rush to Morkane to defend the capital. And there's this great epic siege of Morkane where it's this titanic Waaagh, which very heavy savage orc focus, and there's this horrible big shaman, and there's the big horrible war boss. It's a big fight. Abhorash is having PTSD, essentially. It's happening again, where this horrible race of just awful is on his doorstep, and he is fighting as hard as he can, but there's just too fucking many of them. And he's been training his disciples. He's been training Ushoran's get. Many of the Strigoi have been learning from him. Like Vorag Bloodytooth studied under Abhorash for quite some time. Fucking Ushoran is a beast. He's wearing the crown of the Gash. He's very strong. They're doing great. Ushoran gets sniped. A big old shaman on a wyvern just builds up so much Waaagh magic that even the crown of the Gash can't stop the next blow, and Ushoran falls. And Abhorash goes, God damn it. Because he realizes with Ushoran down, the other vampires start scattering, and the city is lost again. And it's genuinely, because it's not like these weren't there were kind of nasty sides to them, but these weren't like horrible Nagashazar, Sauron, Mordor type cities. Like, these were places of culture with beautiful architecture and lots of innocent people. The people who genuinely, for the most part, kind of liked their lords, because they were a little scary, but they only ate like criminals and stuff. If you followed the laws and behaved, it was not a bad life. It really wasn't.
There was very clear laws in place that created effectively a working vampire society. And it wasn't this dark, grim, wrapped up in black magics and dar pooling everywhere and everything turning grim because of it. It was pretty much the opposite. And it took everything that Lamia had tried to do before, and it siphoned it down into the bits that would make it work. Now, was this a perfect city? As a human, you were almost certainly a second-class citizen. In many respects, you could look at Rome and how they treated their slaves. Many slaves were treated very well indeed. because that's the way. Yes, some people chose slavery as a way of paying off their debts to get back out of slavery again. And humans, in many respects, were owned by the vampires, but many of them could become full citizens, as in vampires, by excelling, by doing something extraordinary, where they would then be brought into the ruling component of this nascent vampire human empire. It wasn't perfect as we would view it as perfect. It was no great democracy, for example. Humans did not have the best place, but they did have a place, and they were fully protected, and the law was there in place. It was not a place of high crime and awfulness and bloodstrokes, states, and the rest of it.
Your options were the land of the dead, as it has now become at this point, not great. Orcs out east, not great. Or these chaos tribes to the north, not great.
So let's not paint a perfect picture here, but in terms of the types of society you get in Warhammer, this is one of the better ones, because people flourished. Vampires flourished. And there are some who would not allow this to exist in that form, and they moved against them.
Yeah. So Abhorash and his 4 disciples leave again.
Bye.
And this is where we will pretty much get ready to say goodbye to Abhorash.
And there are 4 disciples still with him at this point.
I don't know if they're all still with him.
I don't think that's definitely the case. I don't recall that being the case.
Well, no, because Well, I'll get to.
I mean, might be.
There might be because of what I'm
not the case.
There might be because what I'm about to say, but we'll see. So at this point, where there's a lot more that Abhorash does, but this is not important to the Blood Dragons as a whole. So we move on through his story, and this is where he goes on his exile with his followers, and he goes up into the mountains, and he's wandering, and he's fighting, and he's perfecting. And we've already kind of talked about it, but he finds a great big mountain, this huge mountain that has a big corona of flame because there's this big, terrifying red dragon on it. And Abhorash goes, I'm going to fight that fucking thing. And he goes up there and he fights it one-on-one. He forbids his followers from helping, and he goes and fights it. And according to versions of the story that I've read, supposedly all 4 of them are there to witness it, which would mean that they're probably still around, but who knows?
Quite. It's almost mythic, this particular tale, because it's a giant volcano.
It comes off very Jesus and his disciples type story.
It's a giant volcano. It's not just a mountain, because the dragon itself is in more than one description of it described as ascending out of the crater at the peak. So it's basically a giant volcano, and the corona of fire is probably active volcano. But most of the stories don't use standard language. They're kind of mythic in terms of how they're presenting it, because this is an almost mythic event. This is the event that turns Abhorash into effectively the god of vampires.
He becomes a demigod.
Totally. And crazy stuff.
As we say, they fight according to the myth for a full day and a night, which does come off very biblical. And Abhorash finally kills the dragon. He drinks his blood. He casts it down from the mountaintop, which is very funny. Imagining him trying to pick up something that's that much bigger than him. But and he realizes that he has cured his need for blood. He no longer thirsts for it, and he is infused with power. And he turns to his 4 disciples and he says, "Go forth and do as I have done. And when the time comes, I shall call for you."
Yeah.
Which, once again, very biblical. And then he just vanishes.
He does.
He will come back one more time relevant to this. But for the rest of the timeline, and this happened at least probably like a good 4,000 years ago, he completely vanishes from the overall storyline.
Pretty much. This is it. Abhorash is gone. The Blood Dragons are now off to go do their Blood Dragon thing. There's only one other detail I think is probably worth adding to this, and that's one of the ones that were added in Night's Dark Masters, where they give an actual oath that apparently Abhorash provides to his followers that they all have to take when they become a Blood Dragon. I'll just quickly read it out. Let your blade be your only truth, let death be your only answer, and let your quest be for naught but to become more than what you were.
Totally not a Grail Val.
Yeah, totally not a Grail Val, not 100% not. And that's nice. I mean, Abhorash is done for our story, and Abhorash, in the greater scheme of things, is now effectively a vampire god walking around the Warhammer world, doing his own thing. Immune to the blood curse, not necessarily immune to sunlight, not necessarily immune to anything else. We know, for example, he has no shadow. So he's not immune to everything that is to be a vampirism, but he's no longer cursed to drink blood. He has freed himself from this.
I will add one last note, which if I'm about to say something, and as far as I'm concerned, it's canonical because no one can prove me wrong. You can't. And if you want to know more, you'll have to insist we do an Abhorash thing in the future, or drop a very big super chat. But the only other thing you really need to know about Abhorash is actually one very canonical thing, one thing we're going to talk about in a minute, and then one thing that I'm about to say that I'm referring to. So the one little canonical thing is that his and Neferata's love does fall apart for anyone that cares. We'll go over that if we ever do a thing, because she becomes more Neferata-y. And he goes, that is not the woman I fell in love with. And it literally, their kind of tryst ends with him throwing a spear through her heart, which paralyzes her for a long time because he was defending Arabians, funny enough. So if you want to hear about that, maybe come back next week because we might be talking about something related to that. Second thing, we'll get to it a little bit. Third thing, he takes a new lover, his one true lover after he leaves Neferata, which is Gilles Le Breton. And I'm just going to leave you with that. I'm not going to elaborate further until we do an Abhorash stream, or a Gilles Le Breton stream. Morton Crescent. I know he doesn't practice it, but Abhorash is still a vampire. Does he still have magic? Yes, he does.
Yes, he does.
All Absolutely. Vampires do. Except, funny enough, except for one, technically. Good old Conrad.
Abhorash is a vampire, and if we're wanting to know where he is today, it's generally said that most blood dragons believe he's sitting under a mountain somewhere waiting for them all to turn up.
He's meditating some ridiculous game.
God, we're back. That's clearly bullshit. He's still wandering around doing his stuff.
Phil, to go back to my previous post, I was wondering how storytellers would adapt the more one-note bloodlines into different scenarios situations, not just to serve as a final boss. It's not that crazy hard because remember, I mean, bloodline, even with a bloodline, there are many different tiers of vampire. Like a freshly turned vampire, it's spooky, but it's not like a fucking vampire lord. You know, there's a lot of different tiers you can play with.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that the bloodlines are one note. I think they've got multiple notes. Indeed, many of them are symphonic in how they can be presented. So I have no particular difficulty with using all of them as the bloodlines. I'm working within what we'd expect to be those one note, to use your quoted mark, delineations, but still have really cool, interesting stories that have beginning, middles, and ends that don't necessarily all end in boss fights.
Mike, I'm always going to say is, you're right. Gilles did have children, which a king needs to do. It is his duty. But I will note that when the world was ending, who did Abhorash decide to go spend the last moments with? The Green Knight, aka Gilles Le Breton. They're so gay for each other. I'm telling you, I don't have time to get into it. They're super gay for each other.
And also, just as a small point, marriage amongst nobles does not mean the same as we understand modern marriages to be.
Donovan, the unknown disciples of Abhorash seem like prime candidates for Uzul to take the skulls of. That could make a good story. One of them dying to Uzul. You're 100% correct.
Yeah. This is a story that should have happened.
Yeah. It is.
That would have been cool.
That would have made a beautiful Hammer and Bolter short story.
Oh, that'd have been beautiful. Yeah.
Survivor. I'm getting Abhorash is the Cain from.
I disagree. So that's Kane from World of Darkness's card sheet. He says, no, you just die. So, Survivor, I'm going to disagree with this one heavily because Abhorash is not Superman in that he's absolute. In fact, in some respects, he is because he has his own kryptonite. He's immune to combat if it's only combat, but it's not because there's all manner of other stuff. His kryptonite, magic. Superman also has problems with magic. So, hey, yeah, he's a bit Superman-esque in that regard. But yes, he can be taken down by magic, various artifacts. There's all manner of problems he still faces. He is not a no, you just die character. Unlike Kane, who is absolutely that in the World of Darkness angle. He is more complicated, more flawed, and also much more capable than many would like to admit.
Yeah. Wouldn't be Gilles' lover incinerate him? Actually, no, because Gilles, that's not how his particular powers expressed. Because each Grey Knight is different. Lewin Laneker, vampires would not want to deal with Lewin. Lewin is a super anti-vampire build because he's got fucking like god blood. But Gilles was not that. He was very different.
Each of the Grail Knights are different. In fact, you often find the Blood Dragons are equated to Grail Knights for vampires, in that they are one of the few things that are capable of withstanding a lance charge from Grail Knights and also defeating them, because Blood Dragons are that capable. But they're in some respects almost antithetical to each other, because on one side it's holiness against the unholy, but on the other side it's the unholy against the holiness. It makes for a great fight.
Yep. Tyrant 25. I just realized the potential of the super chat to put words in your mouth. Hi, I am your name here, and I believe Conrad von
you didn't realize. Hi, I am Andy Law, and I believe Conrad von Karstein. I presume your intent did nothing wrong. Conrad of all the vampires to go for.
We literally went into a shop in Edinburgh, and Andy whipped out the fucking hi, I'm what was it? It was the fucking Mass Effect meme.
Oh, well, this is my favorite shop in the city.
Yeah, you literally said that when we were shopping in fucking Edinburgh.
Yeah, I did.
Scate, do we know anything about Blood Dragon activity in the Vampire Wars? Yes, we're gonna get there. Mordheim, not as much. They didn't care. Like a couple of them probably went there to fight something, but it wasn't really that kind of place.
Blood Dragons are one of those things that you can loosely cover like this. Is there a big fight going on? Yes. They will gravitate towards it.
Yeah.
Because they are looking to perfect themselves. So most positions, Mordheim, there'll be a couple of them around there, but they're not interested in all the weird stone that's all over the place. They're interested in all the other people who've come to it, and can they learn from them by effectively defeating them? Yeah, so yes, but no but.
Yeah. Border Princes, I'll get there. Rivals of Gashtag, potentially, probably not. Generally not, because Blood Dragons generally don't like to rule. They tend to be out doing stuff. They're not really I'm going to be a border prince and sit here and build up my kingdom for a couple decades. That's not really their modus operandi. Dumbman, sorry it's a bit too dark. I'm not sure if it's ever explicitly stated, but I imagine Abhorash may have even considered ending himself after being turned and killing those 12 people, but his sense of duty responsibility prevented him from doing so. Yes. If memory serves, I do believe if you read the Masters of Death, it was supposed to be a trilogy. Abhorash, funny enough, was supposed to get the third book. It never got written. GW canceled it because end times happened. But if you read Masters of Death, all 5 of the OGs are very big characters. The first book's about Neferata, second book's called Master of Death, and it's kind of more about Wazoran, but not really. Neferata is technically the main character, but it's pretty. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. It's got a lot of fun drama. So check that out. Nerds are back. Not a real question. I just want to say thank you. The past couple of years have been rough, and listening to these streams has been one of the things that helps me get through. Oh, well, that's very sweet of you. Thank you very much. It also helps me get through. I've had a rough week, and this has been a good recharge for me.
Yeah, it's lovely to just chat stuff we like.
Would I want Abhorash and AOS like Ushoran? No, not really. If he showed up, I wouldn't be upset. But considering we just got a brand spanking new mini for his equivalent, or Prince Vordry, who's like the big Blood Dragon character in AOS, and he has a new gigantic fuck you zombie dragon mini that's gorgeous. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. Given Abhorash's love for Lamia, do you think he's bothered by the fact that Neferata's bloodline are known as Lamians? Also, do the Lamians call themselves Lamians or not? Do they call themselves Lamians? Yes, they literally coined the term, and it's them kind of rub it. I would very much say that other bloodlines that know and care about their history probably find it annoying.
I mean, to a degree. I mean, strictly speaking, Neferata was the queen. They are.
That's true. That's true. She does have the claim to
it. She has the claim to it, and I think that we can very easily forget just how important Neferata is. Neferata was their ruler. She was their creator. She was the starter of all of this. Neferata is enormously important in this.
I don't think it would bother him at all, to be honest. I think he'd be like,
And Abhorash is beyond it now. Abhorash has moved on to. I mean, it's been thousands of years. It's a different world. I don't think that's something that's high on his list of concerns.
Strigoi boy, in my headcanon, Abhorash and Ushoran do the Arnold/Carl Weathers bicep handshake. Fight me. I don't think they were that close, but sure. Why not? Darius Rose, Blood Knight, Dragon Princes, Chosen Chaos Knights, Grail Knights, Wild Riders, lore-wise, on average, how powerful are they? How would they rank? I really, in the interest of time, I'm going to blow through this. It depends a lot on author. I will say the big thing.
Yeah.
Because some authors will tell you that Chaos Knights are like that. They are it. Like, they are the best, period. And then you'll literally have some other author come around the corner and say, did you just fucking mouth off about my vampires? And then there's another author across the room that's like, excuse me, Bretonians? So it just depends. I will say, I don't think Dragon Princes and Wild Riders are really up there with the other three.
They are not. They are bluntly, simply not. Chaos Knights are pretty much the GOAT until we then add superhumans. And Chaos Chosen Knights kind of almost are, but they're not full-fledged Blood Knights. Full-fledged Blood Knights are probably better, as are full-fledged Grail Knights. But you'll find that the rules in Warhammer tend to fluctuate wildly for how best to make them balanced and represent them on the field. Point man on man, a Blood Knight probably wins most of these. Grail Knight probably second, Chosen Chaos Knight probably third, and your elves down at the bottom.
Yeah. Dominic, hi, sorry for the last week. Curse of this. There was no last week.
Sad word limit.
Yeah, but I was trying to say fund for Manon / Manananon, Irish
Sea God for Mathlan. Yeah, for a potential High Elf Lord.
I don't 100% know if I'm interpreting this correctly, but I do think we're getting Sea Lord Island for the High Elves, if that's what you're asking.
Ashland. I'll keep on saying that.
I'm not going to change. Karachiva, do Blood Knights comprise solely of Blood Dragons? It depends.
No is sort of the answer now, but yes.
The answer really should be no, but like most people are probably going to tell you yes.
Yeah, exactly. So when they separated out the bloodlines and no longer said, you have to have this to be a blood dragon, you have to have this to be a Lamian, and instead said all vampires can be this and all of these are that, the blood dragon's representative became those blood knights. They became the representation of that in the army. But if you wanted to paint up your blood knights as, say, Karsteins, that's fine. You can do so.
There's even like some wiggle room. Like there has been, especially like in the end times, they introduced like the von Karstein Blood Knights, which are the Drakenhof Templars, which cool, great.
Yeah. So the answer is yes, there are others. But loosely speaking, the Blood Knights are the representation of the Blood Dragons in the Vampire Counts army list.
If they're all real vampires, which they are, how the heck can any other cavalry such units, except for single inches and Grail Knights, fight them equally? They don't. They absolutely curb stomp the shit out of everybody, but they're really expensive. Really expensive. Fielding. I'll put it this way: Conrad von Karstein was a generally pretty shit tactician, and he couldn't use magic, and he had to literally beg and threaten necromancers to do anything for him. And a lot of the other vampires didn't really like him that much. So he should have been a pretty easy thing to deal with, but he managed to get a good chunk of blood dragons to team up with him. And it made him borderline unstoppable until they got bored and left.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the description stats for the Blood Knights, they are generally described as, and to quote the army list, the most fearsome cavalry in all of the old world.
They are meant to be to fight tabletop. Like they suck to fight.
Having said that, though, they're not characters. And characters are better than them. Your average vampire character, a base vampire character, is going to be better than them. But they are still ridiculously tough. Strength 5 is a base for basic troops, effectively. It's ridiculous. But they're still not as powerful as vampires should be. What they are is a representation of the blood dragons on the battlefield, and they're super fun. They're powerful, but not as powerful as they could be if you were running purely by the lore. If we were running by the lore and not by what works as a balanced unit in Warhammer, they would be ridiculous.
Yeah, in the lore, they're bonkers. The only thing that slows them down generally is that, once again, they can't be everywhere at once, and battles tend to be very, very big. And there are things that can hurt them, like really powerful spells and war machines and stuff. But generally, they're a pain in the ass to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, loosely speaking, Chaos Warriors are better than them. They are.
Yeah.
just a stat on stats, but lore on lore, the vampires are much better than
Yeah, should be spanking them. Tyrant 25 wouldn't be. Oh, well, I already answered that. Haha. Donoman, so he loves men and women. All Abhorash. Am I right? I'm here
that's
all
a weak
month.
stretch.
Oh my god. That was that didn't leave a good taste in my mouth. Sorcerer friend, when Gilles spared Abhorash, he made him swear an oath of fealty. How would you both of you expand on that story? So that was what I was joking, but also not really joking about the whole gay lovers thing. Of that there is a story about Gilles and Abhorash dueling, and supposedly Gilles wins and doesn't kill Abhorash because he's so moved by Abhorash for some reason, which does not make which I will say, if they're not lovers, does not make any fucking sense. But how would I there's a lot I'd like to say, but I'm looking at the time and I kind of think we got to move on. So I would I know it sounds like I'm memeing and it may sound stupid. I would want to really explore a romantic story between Gilles and Abhorash to flesh them both out heavily.
Agreed.
And explain.
That's all I'm saying.
Gilles,
agreed.
Gilles not killing Abhorash borderline violates his oath to the Lady of the Lake, which, if I was writing the story, could explain how he got shot and killed, because that shouldn't have happened. He had the blessing of the lady. How did someone like throwing a spear or a lucky greenskin firing a bolt thrower, how did that kill him? The lady wasn't with him. Why? Maybe because he spared someone he shouldn't have. Just saying.
I'm just going to bring up this one. They're not brothers in arms. There is something quite different here. They haven't fought side by side through battle high and low. There is definitely a different form of
according to the lore we have, they never fought side by side until the end times.
Yeah, totally. It's not a brother in arms situation.
Gilles X Abhorash Pride stream, we fucking riot. Well, you better get writing until it shows up in a poll at some point. Mornington Crescent. My blood dragons were conversions from a certain order with swap mounts and also called the Knights of the White Wolves. That's good. Nice. Very well done.
Mornington.
That's
Love
good.
it.
Nice. Done, man. A potential way to clarify the bloodline / archetype thing could be that the bloodlines generally gravitate certain traits, but then there's some bloodlines or even individual vampires are outside of the general bell curve may lead to yeah, I mean, there's a whole thing. Go read the Ulrika trilogy. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Go read the Ulrika trilogy. It heavily tackles this topic.
Yes, Ulrika trilogy will both undermine everything that the army lists say and also sort of half support it.
Darius, the jerk Neferata treating Abhorash like that. I'd like to give her a piece of my mind. Neferata literally caves open my skull and takes my mind. Yeah, she would. Jonathan Scott, Blood Dragon should be as powerful as Monstrous Cavalry are for other factions, but without any of the downsides of being Monstrous Cavalry. Correct.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Yeah, in Age of Sigmar, they are fucking spooky. They are very fucking spooky.
Yeah, in Warhammer 8, they're good.
They're
really good.
Warhammer 8 was not a good addition for cavalry. It was not a cavalry-friendly edition.
They're nowhere near as good as they should be, I think.
Yeah, I think in 6 they were pretty fucking awful. Like scary. Sorcerer Friend also going to use the stream to shamelessly beg Andy to release his high-end NPC statting guide. Great stream as usual.
Yeah. Well, we'll discuss that at a later date because I have some ideas on that actually.
All right, so Abhorash is removed from the story. We're post Abhorash. So the next
Abhorash.
Yeah, the next major development that happens is Walach. And Walach, we know for a fact, is one of the 4 OG disciples from all the way back in the Lamia days who's been following Abhorash around for hundreds of years. And Walach starts wandering around. And like Andy kind of said earlier, there's a very funny retcon where in the old lore, it was Walach who gave the name of Blood Dragons because he's of what he's about to do. But in Night's Dark Masters, they put a very funny update where they say that he's wandering around and he just happens to come across a place called Blood Keep. And he goes, oh, that's funny. And then he looks and he's like, oh, the Ordo Draconis. So you're the Order of the Dragon? And for some reason they go, that's what that should translate to. But no, we're the Order of the Blood Dragon. And he goes, well, that's cute. Let me in. So like it's just like a random coincidence, which fate, whatever. But Walach just shows up out of nowhere. typical spooky opening scenes of a movie situation. And he bangs on the door and he says, "Let me in." And the Knights of the Order Draconis, who were responsible for guiding a path that, like Andy said, does not make any fucking sense based on where it's described to be. It should either be way further south or way further north, but not there. But apparently they protect some pass that somehow goes to Pretonia from there. And so being the good, noble, honorable Empire Knights that they are, they let him in. And he challenges every single one of them to a duel, and everybody dies. And it's either you didn't impress him. It was basically auditions. And if you
pretty much,
if you don't impress him, he kills the shit out of you, drinks your blood, and turns you into a white. And if you did impress him, he gives you the blood kiss against your will, and you turn into a vampire and are now his.
One of my favorite bits about this entire story is that and pretty much no edition is this ever presented with the God voice, which is really, really rare. Most of the editions of most stories, you tend to find something like this. And this character went over here and did this. And in one night, they killed everything. Woo! But in pretty much every single version of this tale, it says, according to the Tome of Lamentations. And it says this in the Liber Necris, it says this in the army list, it says this pretty much everywhere. They always drop the Tome of Lamentations saying that a lone figure arrived at the keep and begged entrance, got lit in, and then slaughtered his way
which is like,
all of the knights in there.
Who spread the word if he killed everybody?
Quite. It's super cool, though, because it's one of the rare examples where I think Warhammer lore has actually been done better than it sometimes has been done anywhere else. This is a story of mythic proportions, where this entire keep gets taken over. The entire order of knights become either vampires or undead in their service. And they then proceed to continue doing what they were doing before for quite some time, before eventually they're uncovered.
Yeah, so what's very interesting is that here Walach deviates from what he's kind of supposed to be doing, which he's supposed to just be endlessly wandering until he gets good enough to fight a dragon. But instead he squats here. Like, he sets up shop, and he hangs out here for a hot while. Like,
and he preys upon everyone that's passing by.
He kind of just sets up a little asshole shop. Now, granted, the story of Walach, according to some short stories and some other lore we have, indicates that he has a lover that kind of plays into why he stays.
Yeah, there's she gets named as well. Oh, will it come back to me? No, it won't. Oh,
I don't remember her name.
Aurora. Her name was Aurora. So Aurora, and she doesn't just have a lover; she has a bride. And Aurora lives with Walach up here. That just popped out of my mind from nowhere. So Aurora and Walach are effectively ruling from Blood Keep. And this causes inevitably some issues because they end up not doing it quietly and interestingly in a very unblood Blood Dragon-esque way, as we'll come to understand the Blood Dragons later. But there's a reason for this. It's because this story was written right at the very formation of when they were deciding what Blood Dragons were. Because these blood dragons are not particularly honorable. They go out and they just challenge and they murder.
Yeah, the Blood Knights, which are generally directly descended from Blood Keep. So, like, they come from Wallach's organization. The Blood Knights that you see in Sylvania, for instance. They're dicks. Like, by Blood Dragon standards, they are absolute fucking assholes that just kill everybody. Their honor system is pretty much non-existent, and they murder for fun, and they're just awful. They're awful. One thing I actually forgot to mention about the Blood Dragons that's not super relevant, but worth noting, is that so once Abhorash left the Blood Dragons, the likes of Walach, notably, you remember that whole thing about, like, we're going to be buddy-buddy with Ushoran and help out Stragos and stuff? Once Abhorash leaves the picture, all the Blood Dragons start hunting the now homeless Stragos for sport. Because, hey, what's a greater challenge than fighting another vampire?
Yeah, this entire section is quite interesting because what we have is our vampires holding up in the castle, and depending where the story we go on depends on just how monstrous they are. Whether they are both guarding the pass and taking their due, which means they are challenging the mightiest warriors and letting some of them join them, or alternatively murdering them and any who are too weak to stop them. But or alternatively, they're just monsters. So we've got different stories here. But what we know for certain is that eventually this attracts the cult of Sigmar, and the cult of Sigmar gathers together at least
Gunther
four.
Van Hal or Van Hal.
It's always it's Van Hal in this case rather than Van Hal.
Yeah, because this is post Black Plague. So the Van Hal line is like, our ancestors sucked. We're the Van Hels, not the Van Hals.
Yeah, that's it. So from Helfen, and it's the Van Hels from Helfen, and they gather 4 complete orders of knights to effectively assault the keep, and they vanquish them, send them out, and destroy them all. And we end up with blood dragons spreading across the old world from here. And with the original stories, we also get a very clear idea of what the curses are for the blood dragons, because the blood dragons are obviously vampires, but each of the bloodlines have got their own unique issues. And it's about this point that they are in the original stories make it very clear that the blood dragons are utterly obsessed with their martial prowess. And it's far more than they just want to do it. They are absolutely obsessed by it, incapable of seeing through to good logical outcomes if there is an alternative path through martial capability.
Yeah, and 2 other notes I just want to include for funsies of that. So Gunther Van Hal, as you might guess, witch hunter. The fact that he discovered the truth behind Bloodkeep and survived over to get a bunch of knights and come back is genuinely very impressive. And he even survives the siege, but it takes 3 years. It's a 3-year siege, despite having 4 full knightly orders and the vampires being in a very obvious place. It takes 3 fucking years to kick them out. And if memory serves, I believe Aurora dies in the siege. Wallach's bride. Which he does not take well. And he flees out. Walach will come back a little bit later, but we've got to move on to a different character at this point. Just know that Walach, his lover dies. He turns even way darker than he already was, and him and what survived of the blood dragons scatter, like Andy said, out to Bretonnia and the Empire and the old world in general.
Yeah, if you're wanting to see your classic blood dragon vampire, it's the descendants of these people who came from the keep and then spread out from the old world. They're not the only blood dragons, because as we said later on, it would be retconned that anyone from Abhorash's line was called a blood dragon because of what Abhorash did. But the classic blood dragon that we know, that knight that almost looks like an Empire knight, but with the blood red, spiky armor from the old world, comes from Walach and the Walach Harkon bloodline that spread out from this central point in the middle of the old world.
Yep, and that takes us up into Bretonnia for the next major blood dragon we have to deal with, which is the Red Duke. The Red Duke, I'm going to very heavily blow through the story real fast because it's dense. I'm just going to blow through the major highlights.
Started here and then turned into something bigger as time went by.
Yeah, he has a novel by C.L. Werner. I could not recommend it more. It is so goddamn good.
Good one.
His story is horribly tragic. Of that, the Red Duke. The thing I love about that book is I think it does the perfect job of demonstrating why Abhorash, despite all of his like warrior monkness and his code of honor, all that stuff, he is a monster. He's a monster. Because basically the whole story revolves around the Duke. The Red Duke was a Duke of Aquitaine, which was a kingdom of Bretonnia, and he went down to join the Crusades. He was amazing. He was known as El Sif because the Arabians were so terrified of him, but he was very, very honorable and all this stuff. And there's to cut a whole story short, there's this big plot scheme thing, and he gets betrayed. And he gets hit by essentially an assassin's blade that's poisoned, and it doesn't kill him, but it is killing him. So he's going to die. He's horribly poisoned.
Away.
Yeah, it's a paralytic, and he's dying. And as he's lying there dying on the battlefield, he sees a stranger suddenly show up almost out of magic, just a stranger covered in robes and stuff. and the stranger approaches him, and it's Abhorash. And Abhorash looks down at him, Elsif with an F, or Sif, Elsif, I don't know, however you pronounce it. But Abhorash looks down at him, and the Red Duke realizes what Abhorash is. Like, he figures it out super fast, and he's like, oh shit, this guy's about to kill me. Well, I'm already dying anyway. And Abhorash basically gives him a little speech about, hey, I've been watching you fight. You're very impressive. Like, you're awesome. I don't think it's fair for you to die this way. Like, you're a great warrior. You deserve to go further than this, dying to this cowardly betrayal shit. I don't think that's how you should go. So I'm going to make a decision for you, and I'm going to make you into a vampire. And the Red Duke, you get this horrible scene of him internally basically screaming, trying to die. He is, if he could have offed himself in that moment, he would have, because he sees what's coming for him, but he's paralyzed, so he can literally do nothing. And Abhorash turns him into an abomination, and damns him for all of eternity, because Abhorash just kind of decided for him, and he knew the Red Duke didn't want to turn, and he basically said tough shit. And it's a gut-wrenching scene. It's written very, very well, because it comes off as very, like, the violation of bodily autonomy in that scene is horrid. And the Red Duke's transformation is awful. Because he's such a badass, and he's such a willful, trying not to. Actually, I'll pull this up because it's interesting. He can't talk. Khalida called out to her goddess. The Red Duke can't do anything. All he can do is think.
He's screwed.
So he basically gets bundled up and taken back home, all the way to Bretonia from fucking Araby, and the whole time he is fighting the transformation. And I do not know a single goddamn character in the setting that lasts nearly as long as the Red Duke does. He doesn't die, despite the fact he got the blood kiss. He's got this horrible poison in his body. He doesn't die until he gets all the way back to his castle in Aquitaine. But here's the kicker. The story kind of implies that he's resisting it, and maybe, just maybe, he'll manage to just die normally with the lady's protection. But when he gets home, two big things happen. The first is he figured out that it was his own family that betrayed him and had him assassinated because power and money and shit. And the second thing, his own brother. Though he also slightly misunderstands what they say, which will be relevant in a little bit. And he also finds out that pretty much, I think the day before he arrives, because once again, family manipulating and stuff, his wife and their unborn child, his wife thought he was dead, so she jumped out a window and killed herself.
Classic.
And that kills him. That news kills him. And he comes back, I think 3 days later or 4 days later, as the Red Duke. He is one of, like, when you actually read like his lore and what he was actually capable of, he's one of the scariest fucking vampires in the setting. He is really spooky, because this ties to what Andy said, because what a blood dragon wasn't super well established at the time, and also he wasn't originally a blood dragon. His rules are not restricted by a blood dragon, so he is a really, really powerful sorcerer. He is super good at magic, despite being a blood dragon. Like, he is baller strong. And he basically just kicks the shit out of a lot of people, chews bubblegum, until his brother, I think it's his brother, right? The king? Or it's his, I don't it's either his best friend or his other brother. But it's because it's not the anyone in Aquitaine, it's the king at the time, King Louis. So King Louis, the Red Duke was literally his best friend. Like, they loved one another so deeply. And Louis fights him, and it's this big, ridiculous, epic war, builds up to the Battle of Saren Fields. and we get their final lance charge against one another, and Louis comes out on top. He spears the Red Duke through the heart and kills him.
So some doing, because frankly his stats were tough. I mean, all the way back in 5th, for those who are interested, that was
holy fuck, those are really good stats.
Yep.
Seven?
Yeah, that's his base strength as well.
Toughness 6.
And the Blade of Leaping Gold giving him 7 attacks in close combat as well. He was bluntly awful. I played with him multiple times, and he had the full rules of vampires as well for that edition. So he was a full necromancer as well, capable of doing
even by end time standards. That is a fat stat line.
Yeah, he was pretty goddamn good. I've played this scenario more than once, which is basically the story of the Red Duke and his eventually getting put down, and it's good times. And the later iterations of that story largely followed the one that came in Circle of Blood.
Yeah, King Louis the Righteous. Yeah, and I will say, Zarast. So I think in the original version of the story, he kills him, but there's a thing that's about to happen in a later version of the story. I believe in the novel, he just like stuns him, because if they actually do establish in several books that if you like stake a vampire through the heart, it won't necessarily kill them. It'll just kind of like freeze them. If you don't like do anything else. So he got frozen essentially. And once again, I don't want to get too into the Red Duke story, so we're going to kind of skip over a lot of the details, but essentially he gets sealed away. His name is erased from history because no one wants to, they didn't want to besmirch who he was. And he's just known as the Red Duke. And I am so happy GW never revealed his name. I'm genuinely very glad they never did that.
I'm not too bothered either way personally. I mean, a name's a name, it doesn't make that much difference, but it does leave an almost mythic tale around the Red Duke and who he was and what he was. But given that he's from the royal line of Aquitaine, his name would be known.
Yeah, but they apparently they worked very hard to scrub it out of every possible record, and the Fey Enchantress was involved, so there was probably magic shenanigans.
Of course.
But anyway, so he gets buried. Like we said earlier, he wasn't actually dead. Now in like the original version, he had an amulet, so it was that he did die, but the amulet resurrects him. But the problem is he's trapped in a tomb that has been warded specifically to keep him in it, so he can't go anywhere, and he's stuck in a sarcophagus with no light or anything and no blood, and he's just trapped for centuries. It's really bad. So he goes fucking batshit. Eventually a dipshit breaks him out, and it goes really bad. They have another big war against his own descendants, and the Battle of Sarenfield kind of plays out almost again, and this time he gets hit with his weakness, which I won't elaborate on because you can go read the book, or we could do a stream about him at a later date, where he gets hit with a nostalgia beam, and it basically makes him lose his fucking mind, and he runs away into the Forest of Arden.
Yep, he disappears.
And he basically
off into the wilderness you go.
He vanishes and is now just kind of a Bretonian boogeyman that's out there somewhere.
As he will be right to the end times.
Yeah. And his story is very tragic, but I love his story because he is one of the best examples of the cruelty of the blood dragons, in my opinion. Of that, something I think a lot of people miss with them, and it's a very easy thing to miss, is when people read the whole thing about, they fight people in an honorable duel and they turn the people that impress them. It can come off as that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. But the Red Duke story shows how horribly fucked up that is. Like, it is a horrible, because especially they don't tend to stick around with their newly turned kids, so to speak. They just fucking ditch and just leave them to survive and go fight good, get better. And they damn them. It is a one-way street. There is no way back. There is no cure. There's no the lady will purify me.
Dragons.
Yeah. But I mean, even then, Abhorash is still a pretty big dick despite the dragon cure.
Yeah.
It is the blood dragons, in my opinion, are one of the absolute worst bloodlines from a moral perspective because they're so deeply hypocritical. Like they are
the blood dragons are awful. I
they're
mean,
the worst.
the different writers attempt to sometimes portray them as if they're somehow these noble, honor-bound knights that are going from battlefield to battlefield, proving their worth, finding more to join their marvelous coterie of vampires, and they aren't that. Most of them are just horror shows who are out for themselves because they are individualistic, unlike most of the vampires who tend to hide within their herds of mortals. They are off doing their own thing, preying upon anyone that crosses them, and if someone manages to put up some form of fight, they test them, push them, and test them until eventually they either do one of two things: keep them for later, or turn them on the spot. And they're horrific people in general. And they are also semi-religious in their great divine belief that they can eventually, if they manage to prove themselves, face on a dragon one-on-one by themselves. And if they do, they will eventually be able to leave the curse that they have behind. But all too many of them are just so caught up in the perfection of their martial skills that they could care less about chasing down dragons. They're too busy feasting on their murdered foes. Yeah, they're not good guys.
Yeah, bruh, interestingly, I think this is something that would absolutely happen a ton in the setting. It's just not covered in the stories we have. Though, going against your sire is difficult. Like, there is a genuine power that's covered in quite a few stories where freshly turned vampires physically cannot act against the one that turned them. You can actually see this really heavily in Gotrek and Felix Vampire Slayer. It goes really in depth on this. Where, like, even if you wanted to, it would have to be something you build up to over a very long period of time, because you have to become powerful enough that you can resist the compulsion that they have over you, which is very hard. It's doable, but it's hard.
And I think on the vampire front, again, to not be so blanket with that, I would say that that's probably just one of the many potential powers that you might have as a vampire. The ability to stop your child working against you.
My name is Sotek, and Abhorash / Blood Dragons did nothing wrong. Yeah, clip it and ship it. S. All right, so we have wrapped up essentially the Red Duke.
The Red Duke. I mean, that'll do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not true about the Red Duke, but loosely speaking, the Red Duke is created during the Crusades, comes back, has a bunch of fights, and becomes a blood dragon boogeyman of Bretonnia.
I missed a couple ones.
Yes, you did. Up above.
Yeah. No survivors? Then where did the stories come from, I wonder? Good old Captain Jack Sparrow making a great point. Yeah, I mean, hey, it could be that Walach walked in and was like, hey, you peasant people that aren't worth my time, get the hell out of here.
Or it just came from the very blood dragons themselves.
Yeah, or the blood dragons are telling it. Yeah. Let's see. Could you remind CA that Ulrika is a fully fledged Lamian vampire, should be recruitable by the vampire counts? I would love to, but I can tell you, because I've had this discussion, that Games Workshop said no. The Games Workshop said she may not be part of the vampire count armies because they felt that it was not appropriate for her character. As it currently stands. Now, I will say, if we ever get Neferata added to the game, maybe that's an argument that could be reapproached. Because I could see the argument that she wouldn't work with a lot of the characters we have, even though she did actually work for Vlad in the end times. But I guess GW forgot, which would surprise me.
They do.
Scathane, final question, I swear. No, you can ask all the questions you want, dude. We love money. We love money. Ask all you want. Thoughts on the portrayal of Matt Mises / Matt Mises vampires in the Perilous Sands fans?
Wow, that's an old one.
For Wolf Rep 2nd edition, Bunk Vampires and Araby. So yeah, this was written by Steve Darlington, I believe. And it's good, but it's not what I would want to do with them personally. The best way I can describe this is it's really good, horrific monsters. I don't think they need to be vampires. I feel like just making them a race that's native to Araby and is a horrifying bug race would work fine on its own. I tend to prefer my vampires to be quite human and be a reflection of actual vampiric notable myths from certain areas. And if I was going to do Southlands, I would want to. Africa does have its own very well established myths on vampires and undead, and I would want to go into that, not make something new. Hopefully that makes sense and doesn't come off as a weird answer.
Just looking at it, I don't think this is Steve Darlington. Having a quick look at it.
Oh, maybe he did maybe I'm thinking of the Jade Vampire one.
Yeah, La Passion, apparently. And I have not read it, so I can't pass any judgment one way or the other. So
I just skimmed it. I just want to say I just skimmed it.
I have not done so. But I will say that I'm not against the idea of what you describe as bug vampires, for example, but I would be much more interested in, I mean, bug vampires does potentially fit quite well depending on how you do it, but I'm not sure it's what I would do with it. But I've not read it, so I can't give comment.
Yeah, and granted, a part of it, I will fully admit, is my brain being affected by the fucking Darkest Dungeons DLC, where like they run with that theme and they do such a great job with it, and I'm like, that's Darkest Dungeon. So like that's how my brain kind of slots it. Darius Rose, even Face Flaya would get bodied by Abhorash? Yes, Face Flaya would get put in the ground. Yeah, except in a particularly realistic thing where he's surrounded by dozens of his best lads and Abhorash is fighting 1v20 simultaneously, you know? Elemental exposure, your 2 cents. How would the Red Duke be in Total War 3? Awesome, great. I mean, he's kind of in the game. They could do it. They could absolutely do it. It, you know, the start positions will be a little finagly, but I believe in them. They can figure it out. Korenshima, my name is Sotek. Oh, wait, I already did that one. Psych, what a novel idea that vampire sires have a sort of blood bond over their children. Yes, I'm sure GW was the first one that ever came up with that. Absolutely.
No, they were not.
Okay, so we're getting into the last part of the Blood Dragon story, which is what we got some major updates, funny enough, to their lore, mostly in 8th edition, which took some story threads that had been set up and basically did them. So there was a lot of rumors and myths going into 6th edition. It gets talked about actually quite a bit in the Storm of Chaos of Walach Harkon's return, because Walach Harkon is, like I talked about, when you read the lore, Abhorash, frankly, just doesn't matter. He doesn't do anything other than that one time he turned the Red Duke. But other than that, he doesn't really do a lot. Whenever you're dealing with like, oh, the Blood Dragons are up to something, it's about Walach. Walach is the big bad of their bloodline. And Walach, there's all these rumors and myths about, oh, he's returning to Bloodkeep. You know, there's Bloodkeep, there are things crawling around and people have heard noises and the occasional, somehow Walach returned. Yeah, except for it wasn't that big of a somehow. And there's actually an excellent short story about it in one of the Hammer and Bolter omnibuses you can find that actually talks about his return, because he is super pissed about his wife. And he is like, I'm going to do all this crazy shit to try and bring her back. And I am gathering my soldiers and we're going to reclaim power here. And 8th edition took the storyline and went fucking wild with it, because of all of so you may be like, oh well, like what could possibly, like, is it in the vampire book? No, it's in the Empire book. Because fucking Karl Franz gets called to the situation, and I actually really like this story. It's actually a fun story of that. Karl Franz, like, the Empire hears about Walach is back. Word gets out that he is fully back and Bloodkeep has been reclaimed. And everybody in the Empire goes, oh shit, because that's not good. And so Karl Franz gathers the army of Reichland and maybe some other friends from like Wizenland or whatever. And he gets on Deathclaw and he goes, I'll go deal with it. And Karl Franz leads a big army out with lots of cool war machines and stuff, and is initially just going to be like, oh, we'll lay siege and bombard it. But as the siege begins, the vampires come out and the big fight happens. And the thing that I like about this story is Karl Franz is out there. He's got Galmaraz. I think this happens before the third Battle of Blackfire Pass. But Karl Franz gets his ass kicked. He goes down hard, and he doesn't even fight Walach himself. He just fights a blood dragon vampire. He gets curb stomped. Karl Franz gets literally knocked out cold, thrown from the saddle, crashes on the ground, and the MVP ends up being actually Deathclaw, where Deathclaw stands over his prone body and just refuses to stop fighting and just holds against undead horrors, vampires, things trying to get at him. And Deathclaw also gets very fucked up, like heavily wounded, but Deathclaw is the best boy, and he protects prone Karl Franz until the battle is basically over. And the combined efforts of the colleges of magic and the gunnery school and the Imperial School of Engineers manage to just level Bloodkeep. They just blow the fuck out of it. And they do enough damage that the vampires are finally like, fuck it, fine. And Walach runs away again, being irritated. And this is one of those things where the end times tried to bounce off this and do something really cool, and they almost pulled it off, but in my opinion, they didn't quite stick the landing, but it was close, where this actually gets referenced later in the end times, there's a rematch between Karl Franz and the Blood Dragons, but this time it's Walach himself. And to Karl Franz's credit and the writer's credit, I actually loved the scene because Karl Franz sees Walach and he's like, I don't have Galmaraz because he gave it to Volton. He's got the Reikland Runefang, and Karl Franz literally says to himself, I'm going to die. I'm going to die here. I can't beat him, but I have to fight him because it was a big breakthrough moment and they needed to stop Walach. Like, Walach is the problem at this particular moment in time. And he fights him and he's killed. Where he's stabbed, he's disarmed, he's stabbed, Deathclaw is smacked down by the dragon, Walach bodies the shit out of him. And I actually love that storyline. There was some weirdness about it, but because there was the whole Walach had fallen to corn by this point and the other stupid shenanigans going on. I didn't
like that.
But I did like the whole setup of that Karl Franz never stood a chance against a blood dragon. And they sell it really well. Like, even with all of his might, like in his Eternal Dialogue, Karl Franz even says to himself, even if I had Galmaraz, I don't think I can beat him because he's just that scary. And you're like, yeah. Blood dragons are fucking scary, man.
And I think this is something that has been reasserted with pretty much every single army list. Our core vampire, a base vampire, is better than pretty much everything else, man on man at that scale. And I mean everything. They're significantly stronger. They're significantly tougher. They're significantly faster. As Hannibal says, are vampires the physically strongest non-giant race? Absolutely are. And if we're talking about the fiction, from the very oldest fiction from Warhammer, you have vampires that look like little girls crushing granite in their hands and turning it to dust, to the most recent editions, I was moving to the 8th edition and the end times, where vampires are again portrayed exactly as they were. They're basically whatever you add for a core human and add several extra numbers on top for their potential centuries worth, or in some cases millennia worth, of training. And Walach is, bluntly, one of the most powerful hand-to-hand combat things that there is out there, barring maybe Abhorash himself. Well, no barring. Abhorash himself is better. Walach is his disciple, and Walach bodies him. And that's exactly as it should be. I mean, it just is. It just is. That's it. He's so much better. And if it hadn't been that, it would have been another one of those moments where we would have looked on at the end times material and gone, oh, bullshit. How on earth can someone with his exceedingly small stats, even when they're boosted up in the end times, deal with something of this extraordinary power when it's, if anything, even more powerful than normal because of the waxing magic that is making its way across the old world? So yeah, it's good stuff.
Now, you may think, oh, surely they are coming to the point where they're done talking. And you're right. We're almost there. But there's
almost there.
There's one more blood dragon we're talking about because there's an interesting one that is in a book that I really, really highly recommend you read if you want it. So the blood dragons are actually kind of spoiled. They have 2 fucking fantastic books. One is the Red Duke, we've already talked about. Well, and I mean, they get some good scenes in the Neferata and Master of Death book, so I'll give them 2.5.
Sure.
But the other book that features an incredible blood dragon is the finale book of Brunner the Bounty Hunter, which is called Blood of the Dragon.
Oh, of course, Blood of the Dragon. I'd actually forgotten about that book entirely.
Yeah,
Blood of the Dragon is a super important one because it meant that I remember when I was doing the research for the Musalon book, I had to completely redraw everything that had been said for Musalon because Musalon got, let's say, minced in that book. So I'm pretty sure it's Blood of the Dragon where it gets completely leveled.
Yes.
So I had to basically say, you know, that map that you've just given me that you want me to do, we can't do that. Musalon is not that city because of these novels and why. And they were like, oh shit. So we had to rewrite large chunks of that book. Good times.
Yeah, and
I've forgotten about that. Nice one. Good read.
Yeah, first
good,
of all, you should
reading.
just get the Brunner the Bounty Hunter omnibus. Like, it's so good. It's so fun.
Yeah, it's a fun one.
And has some absolutely bonkers stories that are all really, really good. But the important thing for Blood of the Dragon is that it literally throws Brunner, who has fought a Tomb King. He's fought vampires already. He's fought Skaven. He's fought Greenskins. He's fought a really cool Dark Elf character that we don't have time to talk about outside of a Brunner stream. He's fought a lot of crazy shit. And this book has the scariest motherfucker he goes up against, which is a blood dragon. And funny enough, I believe he's a Knight of the Black Grail, which traditionally are not blood dragons. I think they're normally like whites, but this book has him be a it's often
the case with the novels, though. They just sort of mix up the lore and get things occasionally back to front. And it means that whenever you're reading one of the novels, always take it with a small pinch of salt because it's very possible it's contradicting the actual army list quite heavily. But that's just normal for the novels.
Yeah, and as you might guess from the name, there's also a giant fuck you ancient dragon in the book. Yeah, and the vampire character is obsessed with it because he's a fucking blood dragon and he wants to nom that vampire. And I will say spoilers. I'm going to say spoilers. I would recommend getting this. This omnibus is actually relatively easy to get a hold of. So if you just want to go in blind, I'm saying spoilers. Leave now. We're pretty much done with all the important stuff. Get the hell out. If you don't care as much, because I'm going to be vague, you get to see why most blood dragons don't actually end up going after the ancient dragon. Because the ancient dragon is kind of fucking insane. Kind of bullshit. Like this book does such a good job of demonstrating how bullshit vampires are, and then goes, oh yeah, but a dragon is way worse. It is so much worse.
Yeah,
and it's great.
True fact.
It's
a fun one.
He's a very good character too, because he walks that line of, he does have a very strict personal honor code, but it's a very fucked up honor code.
Agreed.
And I
forgot about that one entirely. I'm really glad you brought it up.
Yeah, that one I didn't even have to research. It just is in my brain because I love that book so much.
I'd forgotten about it entirely. Good shout.
Yeah, and if memory serves, I think there might also be. Oh yeah, there is. There is a blood dragon that shows up in the Bretonnian omnibus as well.
Yeah. They're often in the Bretonnian books just purely because of the association with the knights.
Yeah, though if memory serves, the older blood dragon you don't get that much time with, but I believe he turns a character who you do get time with, as kind of a big like, Arr! Yeah, I just want to bring this up. Somehow dwarves with no armor, one axe managed to take down. Listen, dwarves are fucking they're crazy, dude. And plus, dwarves have been dragon killing longer than anybody else. They know how to do it, is the thing.
Here, just for a casual thing that I dropped in LAWhammer as one thing, it's very possible the old ones even created them to do it.
But I would believe that. I would believe that 100%.
If you can look at exactly what they do. But yeah, that's a LAWhammer thing. That is definitely not an actual Warhammer thing.
And that, outside of just, your typical Wolfrup pop-ups, but that is all of the major events and notable things you need to know about the Blood Dragons.
Yeah, quite. Well, we finish off with our nice last few super chats and then have a very quick summary.
I think that sounds like a great idea. So if you want to get in a super chat or question before the end of the stream, now is the time.
Now's the time.
Jonathan Scott, what would happen if a dragon ever let a blood dragon drink some of their blood willingly, perhaps as payment? I can see a dragon kid considering those terms. So this is an interesting...
You're missing the fatal component of that, where they would drink it dry if they could.
Yeah, both Zacharias and Abhorash drank it until it died.
Yeah.
They drank all of it. They didn't drink like a little gulp and they were like, okay, I'm done. No, it has to be the entire as much of the blood as they possibly can. Holy mother of fuck. Chances with Wolves, thank you so much.
Wolves, thank you so much.
So I'm not a very active member of the community, comments, super chats, discords, but I watched out for a long time. Greatly appreciate all the love and effort you put into your content. How would a blood dragon react to drinking from the Celestial Dragon Emperor? He'd probably explode. Yeah. To be completely honest, he'd probably just blow up.
It's one of those that falls into one of the categories we discussed earlier, where it's almost certainly going to be a fatal event. It's not going to turn out well.
Yeah. That being said, I think you could
build a good story where it would work.
You could write a great story, especially of like someone trying to get like a chalice of the Dragon Emperor's blood, and that could be a whole fucking thing. That would make for a great story. Thank you. That's very generous. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Could you make them work in a woofer group? A vampire? You can.
You can. I mean, take a look at Ulrika, for example, and how she works through her stories. Yes, you can, but it's one of those things that creates power disparity, because vampires are not just much more powerful than your standard PCs, but they're also much more limited in a variety of ways to your standard PCs, which means they are both exceedingly powerful in some areas and also exceedingly weak in others, meaning that you need to have a party where that sort of disparity doesn't cause problems. Good role players will have no problems with it at all. But if you're playing with just your mates having a beer and pretzel game where everyone's just having a laugh, they will be so massively dominating that it's not worth doing.
Unless you're all vampires. Yeah, but
indeed.
Yeah.
If you're all vampires, different kettle of fish.
Yeah. Night's Dark Masters actually has a pretty good section about like having vampire PCs and like the challenges that come with it. But the big thing I would say is, you can absolutely do it. It should only be for your like very most experienced role players that you know are not hardcore power gamers, but are more about like playing a character, and that's what they care about. And I 100% agree with what Andy said. And I will also say that if you do have a good role player that wants to do that, I think it's probably more fun and less likely to get you in trouble, like power-wise, if you have them turn at some point during the campaign. So they have to deal with all of the struggles that come with being a new vampire instead of being like an established one that's got their shit together. Because who wants to have their shit together? That's no fun.
Agreed.
Broken characters are far more exciting. Diamond, does the flesh of zombies rot over time? Yes. If so, I would imagine that skeletons probably make up the bulk of most necromantic armies because you just pull the bones and storage when not in use. Also, technically, yes, but also Warhammer does this funny hand wave thing where there are as many fresh corpses as there needs to be. Don't think about it.
Yeah, totally. You got to remember that your average campaign, what happens is as the battle is going on, the successful attack of the various undead forces wipes out the opposing force, and then large chunks of that get summoned up as effectively zombies. That is loosely where our zombies come from instead of just our standard skeletons, but the vast majority probably would be, in most situations, skeletons. Rather rotten, horrible ones at that.
Yeah, contrary to what the minis may tell you, the vast majority of the zombies are the guys that just died in the previous turn. It's usually who they are.
Yeah, totally.
Morning Crescent, how does all that dragon blood fit in such a small vampire body? Magic,
magic!
Baby. Literally, magic.
It's proper daft.
Yeah, whatever's in them is just sucking up that goodness. They're a sponge. Donna Man, you say that you have to drink all the blood. Now I have a mad image of Abhorash coming down from the mountain looking like Veruca Salt. Also, what happens when vampires drink from each other? That's actually a good question that's covered in the Ulrika series. It's also a really core important of Manfred von Karstein's story that a lot of people don't know about him. Which is that if vampires can give kind of the blood kiss in a sense, or drink from each other's blood, and when they do that, there is a net positive generally. The vampire that drank becomes more powerful. and usually gains some sort of. Sometimes they just kind of nebulously get stronger. Sometimes it eliminates some of their particular weaknesses that are associated with their bloodline. Manfred, which I really, really would love to do a stream on some point because y'all don't realize how fucking awesome of a character he is.
That's great.
Manfred literally went around almost shopping for the most powerful vampires he could find of every bloodline to make himself fully rounded, which is why he's fucking terrifying. Because he's not, in truth, he's not really a von Karstein. He is a king of the vampires.
He's Manfred.
He's Manfred. And he is bonkers. Stupid bonkers.
And he's my cat.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's very friendly and also very large for his age.
Manfred Catstein.
Sight, thank you very much. What would happen to a blood dragon if you drank from a warfire dragon? Bad. Very bad. Very bad.
Turn out well. That's not going to be good.
Yeah, that would go up there with what happens to my car if I put radioactive fuel into it. It's not good is the answer. Yeah, that thing we talked about earlier with could a vampire be mutated? That would probably be the one circumstance where it would practically be guaranteed.
Yeah, because every time we say something like, "Oh, this never happens," it'll happen somewhere in the Warhammer world, and this would be a pure, obvious example of when a vampire properly gets fucked up.
Yeah, that's like a human being like, "I want calories. I'm just gonna drink jet fuel." What could go wrong?
Start huffing the stuff.
When vampires drink in Warhammer, do they always kill those they drink from? No.
No.
It depends on the vampire and what they're up to. LAWmians in particular like to feed on their thralls or their swains. Swains are a very interesting topic that we go back and watch our LAWmian stream. But vampires, smart vampires, don't, because they don't want to be discovered.
One of the problems with vampires is, though, that they're sunk through with Dar. Black magic that corrupts, and their personalities are strongly influenced by this, meaning that sometimes not only do they have the problem of the beast within, as it is most often reference from White Wolf, not only do they have the problems with the Anne Rice style beast that demands that they feed, and it often means that they go too far, but they themselves just have bad personalities, meaning some of them are like, no, fuck you, I will kill every motherfucker I feed from because I'm bad to the bone, even though it might make sense not to do that. They just go too far because they have personalities that are perhaps not best described as friendly and congenial.
Yeah, and it takes will to stop, totally. To be like, okay, I've had enough.
Because drinking the blood is good shit.
Yeah, it's pretty addicting. Corn Shiva, can a dragon ogre blood act as dragon blood? No, this is actually established in the setting.
Yeah, it's established where dragon ogres in a couple of places are marked as something that they will try to take down on their route towards taking down a dragon. Of course, this doesn't necessarily mean our gigantic, ridiculous.
Yeah, maybe your Kolek Sun Eater or
Kolek
Rock Black types.
Yeah, your truly massive ones. Okay, Skaranarak, for example, as another dead example, would be a good idea. We don't know, but no is the answer.
Sigmar wasting a perfectly good Dragon Ogre Shaggoth.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so I think it's time for us to quickly sum.
Yeah,
I'm going
to
the
last one
quick.
I'll catch real quick. Generally speaking, this would be rare, but certainly not impossible because bloodlines can mix. So if there was a vampire of a LAWmian line that somehow impressed a blood dragon enough, would they do possibly an exchange? Yeah.
Oh, and the LAWmians would love that.
Yes, they would. Yeah. So it could definitely happen.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Cool.
So loosely speaking, what is a blood dragon? A blood dragon is a descendant of our first, most martial of vampires from the city of Lamia, where Abhorash was turned by Neferata's marvelous little potion and hated what he had become. And he instilled down into his bloodline forever the need to perfect oneself martially and to act honorably. But what honor means is very different from one blood dragon to the next. Indeed, the vast majority of them see honor as nothing more than, I will challenge you to a fight, and if I win, that's honorable, and if you lose, that's also honorable. They are not the most honorable of creatures in truth, because they are, like all vampires, cursed. Not just cursed because of sunlight burning them, not just cursed because the name of Sigmar will make them recoil in a big... but cursed because they are laced through with Dar, which is black magic. All the winds of magic coalescing into something horrible and giving them their immortality. And this black magic twists their characters into something horrible. So being a blood dragon is often a complete war with what your essence is. And many of these blood dragons, especially if you turn to the most recent iteration of them in Warhammer 8th edition army list, their blood knights are just monsters. They are horrific monsters of vampires who slaughter everything in their path. But there are many others, and I do mean many, that wander lone across the old world and beyond into the Warhammer world as a whole, seeking out the perfect martial path, encountering others who could possibly best them, and trying their skills one-on-one against the other. And if they win, they will sometimes turn the other, should they be human. If they lose, well, they've never reached the point of killing the dragon, because ultimately, all blood dragons are aiming for one end goal, that mythical outcome where they can one-on-one the biggest dragons that the Warhammer world has to offer. And this isn't something that you can do in a night or even 100 nights. This is something that takes skill, patience, and time. And many of them are literal martial artists in the almost Eastern sense, in that they are completely drilled in the best ways to fight close combat, meaning that the oldest of the blood dragons are, without par, the best fighters that the Warhammer world has to offer. Having said that, the peaks of other species, for example, take a look at Dark Elf Assassins. Dark Elf Assassins set a weapon skill 10. That's extraordinary, but they don't have the strength, power, and constitution of a vampire. Chaos Lords start at weapon skill ridiculous, like 9. It's truly awful, but again, they're not going to be as good as the Blood Dragon. The Blood Dragons at their peak are the finest fighters that the Warhammer world has to offer. But in truth, the vast majority of them are corrupt, murderous, horrible, blood-sucking individuals that think they're honorable, when in truth, they're just monsters.
Yep. And I will grab this super chat here, and then I'll say
good idea.
Ricky Chapman, we remember when our Chaos Lord and our Wolfram campaign was wrestling a blood dragon over one of Kane's swords. Oh, sure, why not? One of Kane's swords that had been found. Our swords knocked from our grips, trying to strangle each other. So fun. You have a batshit campaign. I love
your campaign,
I
Ricky.
love that.
Keep it going.
Just because to end with? Just because this comment amuses me. I probably will play Beastman, but I'm going to buy Cathay because I just want to support it. So last thing I'll say is, hope you all had fun. Hope you all enjoyed it. This went good. I'm pretty pleased.
Yeah.
Second thing, next week over on the LAWhammer channel, we will be discussing Araby by a fucking landslide.
Whoa, Araby next Sunday, super.
Yeah, so that one is actually going to require a bit of mental refreshing, but I still have all my notes from the last time I talked about Araby, so I know where they all are.
Nice.
Thank God for Warmaster.
Warmaster's our savior there.
Yeah.
We have something to say rather than just,
there's people out there somewhere. So be sure to join us next Sunday for discussing the good old, the people of the desert, which is actually a significantly more complex topic than you may initially think. A lot of people think that the Arabians or Arabians, however you prefer to say it, are like not super deep, but like when you pull from the correct sources, you end up being like, oh, okay, there's stuff happening here, which we'll get into. From there, this Wednesday, we are doing the
Colleges of Magic.
Yes, Colleges of Magic tier list, which is not just the Colleges of Magic. There are also some really fun bonus things on there that you might not have heard of. So it'll be a good stream to learn about like the magical institutions of the Warhammer world, and what they specialize in and what they do.
Looking forward to that one a lot.
So that was, and it's a tier list stream, so it's gonna be stupid in a way, like we'll talk about a lot of fun lore, but we're also going to have, we don't get to decide where they go. Y'all get to decide by voting. So it ends up being a whole thing. And then the last,
and if the gold magic's at the top, I will curse you all.
Listen, just because there's one bad apple at the Gold College, but
I like the Gold College. I'm taking the piss.
Should be a super great time. LAWhammer this Friday.
LAWhammer this Friday. Yeah, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. That's all I'm going to say. It's not going to be a standard episode. It's also going to be a one-off. So if you've never watched before, you can certainly watch this one without fear.
Excellent. And I'm actually really looking forward to tomorrow when this past Friday's episode come out, because I couldn't watch it live, and the amount of comments on the LAWhammer channel in that thread is already broken a record. And I'm like, oh no, what happened? Oh no.
Yeah. It all starts off so fine, and then good times.
And then Saturday Rookery should be on this week.
Yes, Rookery is doing a special episode from Chimera Festival in Edinburgh. So
very exciting.
We are going to be gathering with people from Chaosium, actually. We're going to be joined by Lynn Hardy, who is one of Chaosium's long-running line developers, and from Stuart Boone as well, who is a writer of, for example, Cthulhu books in the UK, in Scotland, in fact, Cthulhu of Scotland. So we're going to be discussing Eldritch Horror and how to incorporate such things into your games over on the Rookery channel, 7 p.m. on the Saturday.
Yep. And then last thing is that there will be a new poll up, unless we decide after this chat to just do one particular thing, in which case there won't. But you'll have to wait and see. So with that, thank you all for watching. Once again, very happy Pride Month, and also happy Men's Mental Awareness Month for our lads out there.
I need a lot of mental awareness on my mental health. So
yes, we do. It's actually quite pertinent to this entire stream, I feel like. So take care of yourselves and love yourselves out there.
Vampires.
And with that, we're heading out. So we'll see you guys next time.
Until then, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.